As per board policy, Robert's Rules of Order will be used to conduct meetings, and a moment of silence will be observed before we begin our business. Public comment will be held in a few minutes after we approve tonight's agenda. On this day, recognizing Indigenous peoples in the United States, Orange County Schools would like to express our respect for the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. Originally from the Ohio River Valley, the Occaneechi Indian tribe migrated across the Blue Ridge Mountains and settled in Virginia hundreds of years ago. Following Bacon's Rebellion in 1676, many tribal members were killed and the remaining number were dispersed. Some of the people settled here on the land later known as Hillsborough. The Occaneechi formally became part of the Saponi Nation through a treaty with the colony of Virginia in 1713. The Occaneechi living along the Haw and Eno rivers were hunters and fishermen, and they established the Great Indian Trading Path, which ran north and south. The Occaneechi were not recognized formally as a tribe until 2002, after pursuing such status for 18 years. Today, the North Carolina Occaneechi tribe is the 8th official Indian tribe in North Carolina. The central tribal grounds are north of Mebane in Alamance County, but here in Hillsborough, we appreciate especially the decades of dedication of tribal elder and former chief John Jeffries, who in 1997 first built the replica Native American village down the street from our Board of Education building on land he's been known to call Ghost Field. He subsequently led the second reconstruction of the replica village in 2018. So tonight, we acknowledge that Orange County Schools educates our students on the traditional land of the Occaneechi Band of the Saponi Nation. Hillsborough and its surrounding areas have a difficult history of colonization, slavery, segregation, and is still grappling with the detrimental effects of racism. As we consider our individual roles in helping meet the needs of every student and family in our district, we'll have a moment of silence. Thank you. Dr. Felder, do we have recognitions this evening?
We most certainly do, Chair McKenzie. So thank you and good evening, Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Stevens, the entire board staff, students, and families. I'm excited to announce that tonight we have several recognitions. First, we want to pay tribute, as you already acknowledged, Chair McKenzie, to the Indigenous people, and it's also National Hispanic Heritage Month. So with that, I would like to invite Dr. Dina Keeling, our Chief Equity Officer, to do the honors. Dr. Keeling.
Good evening, everyone. So as everyone has said, today is Indigenous Peoples Day. I have posted and shared with staff an article that's entitled Native Perspectives, Books by, for, and about Indigenous People. It is an article that was written by Kara Stewart, who is Saponi, and she is a literacy coach at Eflin Cheeks. Her article was published in the latest edition of the School Library Journal. So we will begin celebrating Native American Heritage Month in November, but I did just want to take this moment and not let the moment pass without giving recognition to the day and to Ms. Stewart. Tonight, we recognize National Hispanic Heritage Month. Throughout this month, we have been celebrating our Hispanic and Latinx community, including posting information on social media, much like this slide that we have showing right now. Our family liaisons have posted videos of themselves reading children's books in Spanish. Some of our teachers have also been highlighting members of our Hispanic community who have contributed to their subject area. Last year, when I spoke about Heritage Months, I said that this year I would have something special for the board. And so it's always brings me great joy and pleasure to have the opportunity to interact with our truly awesome and amazing Orange County School students. And tonight I have the pleasure of introducing Sally and Estrella, who are two Orange High School students. I asked students to tell me how they thought we should celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, and here is what they had to say. So I will turn it over to Estrella. I guess we'll start with you. So you might have to talk her through this, Joe, because I don't know if she knows how everything works.
Dr. Keeling, do you know if she's a panelist this evening?
I see her in the attendee list.
I'm looking through the.
Yes, I see her in the participants.
Maybe we can go ahead and promote both of the students.
All right. See, who am I promoting? Sorry.
So one should be Estrella. Let's see. Misspelled Estrella. You're looking in the attendee list.
I can unmute her. I don't know how she's connected, but I'll unmute her.
I think that'll work.
Oh,
No, I think I hear her.
Yeah, she should be unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
yes, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Sorry for the technical issues.
No worries.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Estrella Rocha de la Cruz, and I'm a junior at OHS. And tonight I would like to talk a little bit about National Hispanic Heritage Month and what it means to me. So National Hispanic Heritage Month runs from September 15th to October 15th, and it goes back to the year 1968. In 1968, President Lyndon Johnson signed Hispanic Heritage Week into effect, but it was only a 7-day period. And then it was expanded to a 30-day period by President Ronald Reagan in 1988. And this law was enacted in August 17 of 1988. It is celebrated from September 15th to October 15th because many Latin American countries celebrate the anniversary of independence around these dates, and these countries include Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Mexico, Chile, and Belize. And now, Hispanic Heritage Month traditionally honors the cultures and contributions of both Hispanic and Americans as we celebrate heritage rooted in all Latin American countries. So Hispanic refers to a person who is from or a descendant of someone who is from a Spanish-speaking country. And Latino or Latina, Latinx, refers to a person who is from a descendant of someone who is from a country in Latin America. For me, Hispanic Heritage Month is very important because I am Hispanic and Latina. Both of my parents and all of my family are from Mexico, and we celebrate September 16th because it is when Mexico gained independence from Spain. And during this month, I feel like my culture is celebrated and I feel empowered and strong. During this month, many other cultures also learn and gain a better understanding of the Latinx community and their culture. But this is one thing that I think is very important about tonight, that I should not have to feel this way only during this month of the year. I should feel empowered and strong the whole 12 months of the year, but sadly, it is not this way. And it is not this way for other Hispanic and Latinx students like me. For this reason, I strongly believe that Orange County Schools should incorporate a Latinx studies course. And if we have this course in place, many other Latinx students like me would feel way more supported and felt understood by teachers and staff and their other peers. And thank you for allowing me to speak on this very important topic tonight.
Thank you so much, Estrella. We are so excited that you're here tonight and really appreciate your feedback about courses. And I know that's something that the board will be interested in talking about. So thank you again.
And we have one more student, and that is Sally.
Mr. Schofield, has Sally been promoted?
Give me just a second. I don't see her in our attendee list here.
She is in there as S-A-L-L-Y, Sally.
Yeah, she's unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Sally. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. So, I moved to North Carolina my sophomore year of high school, and since I first started school, the Latinx community has been growing a lot. I can see it in my own school and in others as well. I am part of the soccer team, and that has given me the opportunity to visit several schools. And in almost every school I've been, there's at least one Hispanic student. I am now a senior, and I've seen several Latinx students face different challenges. In my opinion, the most frequent one is that Latinx students don't feel like they have a place to belong in their community, in their school community. This is why I would like to propose some ideas to let them know they are not alone and that their school cares about them. The COVID pandemic has taken away so many good things from us already, and I don't want Hispanic Heritage Month to be another one. Since we are doing everything online, I think doing a video explaining the importance of Hispanic heritage and showing it during homeroom would be a good idea. We could highlight the independence of several Latinx communities, the independence dates of several Latin countries. Like Estrella just said, Mexican Independence Day is on September 16th. And on September 15th, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua celebrate theirs. I will also make another short video explaining the difference between Hispanic and Latinx because not everybody knows it, and I think it's important for people to know it. In addition, we could do something like a Zoom call where students share a story or leyenda from their culture, like La Llorona or El Chupacabras. We could get together during community time, after school, or during lunch and tell ghost stories. Since it's almost Halloween, it will be a good time to get into the spooky spirit and talk to friends. School was already hard for Hispanic students who don't speak English at all. I know several students who are very talented, smart, hardworking, dedicated, and passionate about learning, but due to the language barrier and lack of resources available for them, they feel discouraged and don't enroll for honors or AP classes. This is why I would like to see a Latinx studies course in the near future at our high schools. If we could offer it regular and honors, it could be a place where Latinx students feel safe to take an advanced class, since they will be learning about their history with other students who share the same interests in this, and this will encourage them to take other honors courses. Thank you.
Sally, thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. And again, I think the board would be excited to hear about a Latinx studies course, particularly honors. That would be so incredible. So hopefully that can come back to an agenda soon for us. I also would love to talk about homeroom, a video to be shown in homerooms about Hispanic Heritage Month. Those are awesome ideas. So thank you again so much, Estrella and Sally. We are so glad you were here.
Thank you for giving me the time and for giving them the time to speak to National Hispanic Heritage Month.
Thank you, Dr. Keeling.
So again, I too want to thank Sally and Estrella and Dr. Keeling. So awesome. We are certainly appreciate you sharing such great ideas. As Mrs. McKenzie said, we will certainly be delving into your ideas, and we just appreciate you being here and sharing. So thank you all so much. Also want to just say that, as we said before, and will continue to say, celebrating the diversity of our community is not to be confined to a day, a week, or a month. We challenge our staff, our students, families, and community to keep the celebrations and recognitions going throughout the year. Next slide, please. So at this time, we'd also like to pay tribute to one of our teachers. We were very recently notified that our very own Jennifer Carson, English language development teacher at Grady Brown Elementary School, will be receiving a 2020 NCSTA award. This honor is determined by other science educators and acknowledges excellence in professional practice. She will be recognized at the virtual NCTSA 51st Award Ceremony on Thursday, November 5th. Now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Chris Gammon, Executive Director, Curriculum and Instruction, and Erin Dennison, STEM Coordinator, to further recognize Ms. Carson. Dr. Gammon and Ms. Dennison.
Thank you, Dr. Felder. Good evening, members of the board, as well as the community. Tonight, we'd like to recognize Mrs. Jennifer Carson, the English Language Development Specialist from Grady A. Brown Elementary School, for her recent recognition by the North Carolina Science Teachers Association with a District Outstanding Science Teacher Award. These awards are presented to recognize excellence in science teaching in North Carolina to teachers who exemplify excellent, creative, innovative teaching of science. The award is open to teachers at the elementary, middle, and high school grade levels. Nominees for this award have demonstrated exemplary teaching in the following ways: creativity in the use of science teaching materials, design and use of innovative teaching plans and ideas, development and implementation of department, school, and/or school community programs for the improvement of science instruction or the stimulation of interest in science and the learning of science, high performance in the use of supplementary materials in an exemplary manner to integrate science with other subjects, and fostering student, school, and school community instruction programs in science. Mrs. Carson has done a phenomenal job of innovating by embedding experiential learning practices into the curriculum to assist students with language acquisition. The following is a message from the North Carolina Science Teachers Association to award recipients. On behalf of the NCSTA Awards Committee, we congratulate Mrs. Carson on winning a 2020 North Carolina Science Teachers Association Award. This honor is determined by other science educators and acknowledges excellence in professional practice. Mrs. Carson will be honored at the virtual NCSTA 51st Award Ceremony on Thursday, November the 5th. All award winners will receive a one-year membership to the NCSTA. There will be a photo and additional information about Mrs. Carson's work in the NCSTA Awards program, as well as a press release and a formal recognition at the 51st Awards ceremony on November 5th. Orange County Schools joins the NCSTA in congratulating Mrs. Carson on a job well done.
Way to go, Ms. Carson. The board is so appreciative of your dedication. Dr. Felder, you're muted.
How's that?
Much better, thank you.
Hold on a minute. There we go. It's a little sensitive tonight. Congratulations again, Ms. Carson. We are so, so proud of you. All right, well, we have one more recognition. And so without further ado, I want to recognize our principals and assistant principals, as this is October is Principals Appreciation Month. So we are so fortunate in Orange County Schools to have 13 awesome principals and 18 awesome assistant principals. We know that our principals and assistant principals are some of the hardest working unsung heroes in our district. They set the culture and academic tone for our schools. They put the needs of staff, students, families, and school communities first, and they do it 24/7. Their leadership and charisma are what makes them one of our district's superpowers. Our schools are great because of our school-based leadership. We will never be able to say it enough, but please join me in thanking our wonderful principals and assistant principals. Give them a round of applause. All right. And at the next board meeting, we will recognize our Principal of the Year and our Assistant Principal of the Year. So we look forward to doing that. So Ms. Chair McKenzie, that concludes the recognitions for this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Felder. So it's time to adopt the agenda, but before we vote on anything tonight in open session, I wanted to mention that Jennifer Moore is not present this evening due to an illness. And with that, do I have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Atherton and a second from Ms. Stevens. Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Our motion passes and our agenda has been adopted. Now is the time for public comments. After the speaker has been recognized and unmuted, they will have 3 minutes to speak. The board will not have a discussion with any speaker. No profane or vulgar language will be permitted or personal abuse against any person. Public comments should not address any specific confidential student or personnel matter. Complaints concerning any specific employee or student are not permissible during public comments. So now, Ms. Stowe, will you please recognize our first speaker and indicate when someone needs interpretation services, please?
Yes, good evening. The first speaker who is on the call is Kevin Reeves.
Mr. Reese, let us know when you are here.
Can you hear me?
We can. You may begin. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman McKenzie, board members, Dr. Felder. So I'm speaking as a teacher and a parent. I teach math at Cedar Ridge, and my son is a 5th grader at Grady Brown, where he's attended school since kindergarten. I'm a part-time single parent. I share dual custody of my son with my ex-wife. We chose, in light of the COVID numbers for midsummer, to enroll our son in the virtual academy for this entire academic year. That decision, particularly since the NC COVID dashboard shows cases trending back upwards again, has not changed. We do not want our son to enter a public building this year. For those of us who are teacher parents living with no other caregivers, the move to Plan B presents a problem with no solution. How can we continue to look after our children if we must return to the school buildings? Moreover, how can we protect our children from exposure if we are spending our days in shared spaces? Any option the county proposes involving in-building childcare is a non-starter. If we aim to keep our children out of school and away from groups, then we aim to keep our children out of school and away from groups. I'm entreating the board to allow for accommodations for teachers who must care for young children. Please allow us to continue to teach from home. More importantly, I ask the board to consider the public health implications of reopening for all staff and students, as well as for the wider community. The window in which teachers would return in December, students in January, falls right inside the period of greatest danger when the coronavirus and the flu will be at their highest strength. I implore you, for our collective safety, to keep Orange County schools on Plan C for the remainder of the academic year. Let's protect our community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Stowe, will you please recognize our next speaker?
The next speaker is Lori Bateman.
Ms. Bateman is unmuted.
Hi, I will pass for this evening. Thank you, though.
Thank you, Ms. Bateman. Ms. Stowe?
The last speaker is Roman Morell.
Mr. Schofield, have you been able to unmute Mr. Morell?
I'm refreshing my attendee list. Sorry about that. Give me just a second.
He was on the call earlier. He's not right now.
Okay, well, Mr. Morrell, you're more than welcome to email us your comments. I'm so sorry that you aren't here. So, Mr., was that the last speaker, just to confirm? Okay, great. Well, then we will move on to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt tonight's consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Atherton and a second from Ms. Smiley. Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Okay, our consent agenda has unanimously passed. So
Madam Chair, were we gonna make an adjustment at some point, or?
I just saw that. Yep. I was gonna ask if we had a motion to revise our board meeting schedule to move our November meeting on the 23rd to November 9th, which would also make it a board meeting rather than a work session.
I would move that motion, Madam Chair.
Second.
I have a motion for Ms. Stevens and a second for Mr. Atherton. Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Our November board meeting has been moved to the 9th instead of the 23rd. So the next thing on our agenda tonight is driver's education and athletics.
Well, thank you so much, Chair McKenzie. We have a number of action items for tonight. Tonight, we're asking the board to review and take action on, as you mentioned, proposed plans for restarting driver's ed and athletics at the high school level. Plan B's proposed arrival and dismissal schedules at the elementary, middle, and high school tiers. The AB cohort alternating week schedule. The ventilation report and the Department of Operations recommendations on 4 Plan B related facility items. And this will be followed by an update on the reopening schools and Plan B for EC separate settings and pre-K students on October 27th, and a staff accountability plan and safety protocol. So that's the agenda for the action items and information items for this evening. Any questions? If not, if we can move to the next slide, please. So the board will be asked to give feedback and make decisions on the following 5 items noted on this slide. We will pause after the first 3 to get your guidance and decisions before proceeding to the final 2. After the final 2, we will once again pause to get your guidance and decisions before proceeding to the rest of tonight's presentation. Now I will turn things, if there are no questions, are we good with the board decisions that we're seeking tonight and guidance and feedback?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Felder.
Great. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Jason Johnson, Executive Director, Student Services and School Improvement. He will introduce Mr. Buddy Hartley. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Felder.
Sure.
Good evening, Board Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Stevens, board members, and Superintendent Dr. Felder. The purpose of this agenda item is to request your approval to start the behind-the-wheel driving portion of the driver's education program. I have with me tonight Mr. Buddy Hartley, who is the driver education coordinator for Orange County Schools. He is here to help present and to answer any questions that we may have. Tonight, we're going to make a proposal of a start date to begin behind-the-wheel training for our students, and we're also going to discuss the safety protocols that will be in place. As a reminder, students have to complete 6 hours of behind-the-wheel drive training after they complete the 30-hour classroom course. The behind-the-wheel training and classroom course allows students to obtain their driver's permit. Next slide, please. As of October 9th, 104 school districts have restarted their behind-the-wheel driving for their students, and 11 districts have not restarted. We currently have 147 students who have been waiting to drive since we got out of school in March as a result of COVID-19. It will take us approximately till March 2021 to get all 147 students through behind-the-wheel training. We also have 250 students who are signed up for our virtual driver's education class. Once they complete the coursework, they will need to take the behind-the-wheel portion of driver's education to obtain the driver's permit. We are estimating that if we get the 147 students done by March, it will still take us till October 2021 at the earliest to get the 250 students who are signed up for the online course currently through the driving portion of the course. Also, we have 130 students who are on the waiting list, and we're hoping we can open up some class sections to reduce the number of students on the wait list. The proposed start date for behind-the-wheel driving is October 14, 2020. That start date will start with us training staff on safety procedures and with us notifying students and parents of driving times. We have the goal of starting our first student drivers back on Friday, October 16th. Next slide, please. Awesome. So on this slide, you will see the safety procedures that behind-the-wheel training will follow, which is backed and was led by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction under the guidance of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. Driving will be optional for students. Parents will sign off on the consent form. We are recommending only one student driver. The Orange County Health Department and the ABC Collaborative recommends having only one student driver in the car at a time. One student driver can put the driver and teacher in an awkward spot. So parents will be aware that it's only one student driver, and we will also have that on our consent form. We're also exploring cameras for the cabin of the car. We will need to check with our school board attorney around privacy issues that may arise with having cameras in the car. Also, we do have one female teacher, and we will try to sign up as many female students with the female teacher. We're also exploring the possibility of hiring an additional female instructor. Just as a side note, Durham is allowing just one driver in the car, but Chapel Hill at this time is allowing 2 drivers. Again, our recommendation at this time is to only allow one student driver. We will also conduct temperature checks for students and teachers. Both teachers and students will sign off on an attestation form before getting in the driver education car. Students and teachers will hand sanitize before and after each behind-the-wheel session. Face coverings will be worn by students and teachers at all times during the sessions. There will be no recycled air conditioning, and windows will be partially open for circulation. Before and after each individual behind-the-wheel session, the car will be cleaned with alcohol-based cleaning products. Also, the driver will change after 45 minutes, and we will allow for 10 minutes between drivers. And finally, there will be weekly sterilization fogging of all vehicles. Before we go to the questioning section, Mr. Buddy Hartley has a few things to say.
Thank you for this opportunity. While we are encouraged that the students are now receiving driver education instruction with our classroom restart, the backlog of students needing behind the wheel will now be substantially longer. It stands as it stands without the option of the behind the wheel training being provided by Orange County Schools. The families of many students are opting to have to pay substantial fees for private companies to provide the 6 hours of driving, somewhere in the neighborhood of $375 to $450 for those 6 hours. And that's so their student can receive the driving permit. Because this is not an option that is attainable by many of our students, they are then left waiting to take the behind the wheel, and those fees are what are prohibiting them from doing so. As you all know, myself, Mr. Johnson, driver education is one of the most important classes and very high on these teenagers' list of completion. When they've taken classes, it'll be 8 months or more before they can finish their driving. With that in mind, it's my hope that we can begin the behind the wheel instruction so that all our students have the opportunity to further their driver education.
At this time, we open the floor for any questions.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you. And as mother of 3 teenagers, I'm familiar with the demands that you're talking about. And I do see this as an equity issue because the cost of the private classes are so expensive. I am just curious, did we provide any, it might not have even been possible, but how did it work for seniors who graduated and were still waiting for their turn with behind the wheel? Were they given an opportunity? And in this coming year, with the backlog that we have, is the hope and demand that we get seniors through before graduation? Thank you.
If they're in the system, or if they're in the backlog now, they would be one of the, by age, they'd be one of the first that would be able to finish up. If they've not taken a class yet, then they surely would be on the top of the list for the classes also. One of the problems with not being able to finish is some of the students that are seniors have taken the classroom at 17 years of age, and have not been able to finish because of the COVID stoppage. The DMV has their rules that an 18-year-old, once they've turned 18, we're not able to drive them, so they then have to look for a private situation to finish theirs. But to answer, I guess, the question, yes, the 18-year-old would be at near the top of the list for their driving now.
Thank you, that's helpful. Other questions? I don't see any. Dr. Felder, do you intend for us to vote on this now, or are we going through sports first?
We're going to go to athletics next, yes.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, you're on mute.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to discuss high school athletics return to play plan. I have with me tonight Ms. Emily Gaddy, the athletic trainer from Orange High School, Kirsten Kelly, the athletic trainer from Cedar Ridge High School, and both high school athletic directors, Andy Simmons from Cedar Ridge and Mike McCulley from Orange High School. You will hear from us tonight a proposal to restart athletics and the safety procedures that we will have in place. Just a quick side note before we get into the high school return to play, I do want to touch on middle school athletics. It is our goal to offer some form of middle school athletics when we return under Plan B in January. Right now, the 2 districts that are in our middle school athletic conference, Roxborough and Chapel Hill, we have been in communication and there is a desire to play, but we have not created any plans as a conference as of yet. Now, with tonight's presentation, we're proposing that we restart high school athletics on October 14th. This would start with allowing cross country and volleyball to start voluntary workouts this Wednesday in preparation to safely start tryouts on November 4th. Next slide, please. 83.6% of traditional public high schools across North Carolina have returned to athletics or approved a return plan. In the chart, you will see the return date of high school athletics for surrounding counties. Just to note, 3 of the 4 districts that are in our high school athletic conference have announced start dates or have already started. That will be Chapel Hill, Chatham County, and Vance. Durham, who is also in our conference, will be meeting later this month to make a decision about restarting. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Emily Gaddy, the athletic trainer at Orange High School, to discuss the safety procedures we will have in place as our student athletes begin to return. Ms. Gaddy?
Good afternoon. Next slide would be awesome, please. The 9-page procedural document was provided to the school board in your meeting packet and is available online. We do have procedures for the following areas that you see on your slide, but in the interest of time, I'm going to hit on a good portion of the highlights. But if there is any questions regarding any procedures that I did not cover, I'm more than willing to answer those questions as well. Next slide, please. This slide just represents what will be communicated to our athletes in terms of what is required for them every day prior to participating. They must have their own individual water bottle that is clearly labeled. They cannot share water bottles, and the schools will not be providing water bottles or cups during practice. They will be required to wear a cloth face covering while on campus. The exceptions being if they have a medical or behavioral condition that prevents them from wearing a face mask, or while participating in exercise. Any other time that they're on campus, they'll be required to wear one, such as when they're going through the screening process, waiting on a ride to pick them up, things of that nature. We have several forms that are required. The North Carolina High School Athletic Association requires a COVID-19 initial screening form. This is completed one time, and it gives us a synopsis of their health since January 1st of 2020. They will have to have a current physical. The dates this year have been amended based off of North Carolina school board policy changes. And those have been communicated extensively to our parents as to which category their child may fall into and what the status of their physical is. They will have to complete their yearly concussion education form. Regardless of their physical status, they will have to update the medical history form. This does not require a doctor's visit, as visits for the doctor have been backed up due to COVID-19. But the medical history is completed by the parents and the student athlete, and it will give us a synopsis of any changes in their medical history over the past year, so that we can be prepared for any medical conditions that may be new for this athlete. We then have an Orange County Schools liability waiver that they will also sign. And then daily they will complete screening, and I will discuss that on a further slide. Next slide, please. In terms of water, this will be communicated to our parents, but no water bottle, no practice. The hydration during practice is important, but in order to limit potential spread of COVID-19, we will not be having communal water sources, such as water cows or things like that, nor will we be providing water bottles from the school. So in this regards, the larger the water bottle, the better, as this will limit our refilling of water bottles. We will never deny an athlete water, or if they have run out. We will have the capabilities to refill them. We will provide, each team will have one cooler that will be cleaned and sterilized daily, that will be filled with water, and one adult wearing proper PPE will be allowed to refill water bottles. But of course, we want to limit the interaction between an adult and a child's personal water bottle. So the larger the water bottle, the better, because we won't have to refill them as often. Next slide, please. Our athletes will have to go through screening daily. And when we return to Plan B in January, this screening will be done in addition to the screening that they receive when they enter the school building. The Athletic Association screening asks a couple of additional questions that the normal school screening does not. So our athletes and our coaches and staff will be screened daily, and these records are kept as we can be audited by the Athletic Association for our records. They will also help for contact tracing. We have converted this attestation form into a digital format. And then our coaches, as well as athletic directors, administrators, and the athletic trainers will have access to the spreadsheet example that you see on the background. And I've set the conditional formatting to flag red if there's an answer that should prohibit the student athlete from participating in sports that day, so that it's painfully obvious to myself as well as to our coaches and administrators if that athlete should not be allowed to participate. Next slide, please. This slide just represents some of the ways that we are being a little bit more restrictive than the Athletic Association. The graphic that you see is more for the general public, but when we establish procedures and policies for athletics, there's several things that we have to look at. If there's North Carolina legislation involved, if there's North Carolina Board of Education or DPI guidelines, and then those affect the Athletic Association guidelines, which we have to follow. Then there may be policy that is specific to Orange County schools, or in this case, guidance or requirements that Orange County government has put into place. Then there may be some things that are based in best evidence practice that we're putting into effect, and the end product is our return plan. A line that is common to the Athletic Association is that each individual school district may be more restrictive than the Athletic Association, but not less restrictive. So while we have to follow all of the rules that the Athletic Association puts forward, we can place some more restrictive policies and procedures in place, which is why our plan may look slightly different than Chapel Hill's plan, than Durham's plan, than ABSS's plan. The ways that we are being more restrictive, we have it set for anyone with a temperature of 100.0 degrees Fahrenheit instead of the traditional 100.4. And that was just at the time that this was written, it was to keep it in line with our current communicable disease policy in Orange County schools, which states 100 degrees. We did not want to have to differentiate the temperature difference between our policy or our procedures and the policy that's already in place. All of our coaches, administrators, and athletic trainers will be trained to ensure safe participation. And one of those is taking the National Federation of High School Sports COVID-19 for Coaches and Administrators class. That this has already been communicated to our coaches, and they have begun that process. If they have not, most of them have completed it already. While we are in remote learning, athletes are going to come dressed and ready to participate with a filled water bottle, and locker rooms will remain closed. There's no need for them to change into athletic gear if they are not on campus for school. So in order to restrict movement in the building to other places, our locker rooms will remain closed at this time. And then face masks with exhalation valves or vents and gaiters will not be allowed. This is to go with best practice, recommendation by the CDC in terms of the exhalation valves, and the gaiters is to maintain with Orange County Schools directives that came out last week about how the face mask has to secure and fit snugly around the nose, mouth, and chin and secure behind the ears. Next slide, please. Additionally, we are putting in some restrictions in terms of intensity and frequency and volume of practice. Evidence shows that athletes are at the greatest risk for traumatic injury when they return to sports from a period of deconditioning. And we start to see that increase in injury likelihood after a period of 4 weeks of deconditioning. And we have athletes at this point may have been deconditioned for 6 months or more.
We can't hear you, Ms. Gaddy. Hopefully she'll pop back on in a moment.
And watch y'all, I can pick up from right here.
That'd be great, thank you.
On this slide is basically saying that over time we will increase the frequency of their workouts. Just starting to build their stamina back up so they can reduce the chances of injury. Next slide, please. Here you will see the schedules that the North Carolina High School Athletic Association has put out for the year. Please note, with cross country and volleyball, they have noted that their first day of practice is November 4th. That's one of the reasons why we want to start on October the 14th in terms of workouts, so we can start preparing their bodies for tryouts, so reduce the chances of injuries. And you will see you can go to the next slide. These two slides lay out the schedules for the entire year, from the first workout to the first practice. Next slide, please. Are there any questions?
Mr. Atherton, then Ms. Smiley.
So I have a few questions. The first one is, and I understand why we didn't cover this, but I did want to bring it up, is can you just highlight the academic requirements that, there's some concern that's been surfaced about, students that aren't doing well will not be playing sports, obviously, because that's an academic requirement. Can you just highlight a little bit of that?
I will ask one of the athletic directors to speak to the academic requirements, but we will follow academic requirements based off the North Carolina High School Athletic Association guidance. Mr. Simmons or Mr. McCauley, could you answer that question, please?
Sure. This is Mike McCauley. According to the High School Athletic Association, we still have to check our eligibility on all of our athletes. The way the eligibility reads is that we must pass 3 out of 4 for the first semester, and for the start of our athletics, it goes back to 3 out of 4 for the spring semester. To be eligible for last spring semester, to be eligible for this continuing spring semester, then we would look back at the number of courses passed for the 2020 fall semester.
Okay. The other question I had was, what is going to be the booster involvement in this? Typically there's a lot of booster involvement in athletics. So just trying to understand what they're going to be allowed to do or not do. Are they not going to be involved in any of it other than helping with financials? Or can you give us an idea on that?
Yes, sir. At this time, we really don't know what their involvement's going to be. We hope to, if we're allowed to bring spectators back in at some point in time during the course of this athletic year, hopefully they will be allowed to, run some sort of concession stand, and that will allow them to continue to, earn money that could help us purchase athletic equipment and things that we're kind of strapped on.
No, fully understand that. And the last question I had was the games, but I get it. We don't know at this point, so I'll leave my questions at that point. And thank y'all.
Ms. Smiley.
I also just have a couple of questions. One, so am I understanding no access to locker rooms? Does that also mean no access to restrooms? Like, will athletes have an access to a restroom?
Yes, they will have access to a restroom. It'll be restricted to 1 male, 1 female, so that we can ensure that those are cleaned appropriately afterwards.
Awesome. Okay, and then in terms of the masking, this one question I have is the medical condition piece. Are we going to require some sort of doctor certification for that, or is that sort of self-stated?
So things like asthma and things like that are indicated on the athlete's physical. At this time, we do not require a doctor's note as to why or why not. But I am aware of our student athletes that do have asthma or other medical conditions.
Okay, I think because we've heard from the ABC Collaborative that asthma doesn't exclude somebody from wearing a mask in general conditions. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Okay, thanks, Ms. Gaddy. So, I mean, the other piece of this, I'm concerned about no masking during exercise, and I understand during like certain high activity forms of exercise, it may be a little bit more challenging. But I was trying to look at what some of the other districts in our conference are doing, and it looks like Chapel Hill is requiring a mask at all times, including during competition. Chatham, it looked like the same thing, and then I couldn't find anything on Vance. So I'm concerned about these potential loopholes for students, the loophole potentially of not requiring a mask if you have a condition without some sort of documentation of that, as well as just a concern, some of the other schools it sounds like are fine with masks, including during exercise, and that's something I'm curious about our decision there. I guess I would personally have sort of erred towards a more wearing masks more of the time.
Do you want me to speak to our recommendation and why?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Yeah, sorry, I know I didn't phrase that as a clear question. It would be helpful if you could speak to our recommendation because, yeah, I guess it's something that concerns me.
So our recommendation is that our athletes are not wearing masks while participating in vigorous exercise. And that recommendation is in line with the American Academy of Pediatrics, the CDC, and the World Health Organization. I'm a member, or I'm part of the Sports Medicine Advisory Committee for the Athletic Association. And we have physicians on there who also serve on the National Sports Medicine Advisory Council for their COVID subcommittee. And we are not currently recommending masks at this time to be in line with those. And some of the justification for that is, yes, while our athletes are breathing heavier and they are breathing harder, they're not stagnant. They're not standing still like they would be in, say, chorus or something like that. They are constantly moving. So they are not in a consistent close proximity to others. And because of the larger space that they're in, such as outdoors or in the gym, there is better airflow. And so the air is not stagnant. It's not sitting still. And then as an athletic trainer, there is concerns for our athletes who have asthma. Masks are also not recommended by the CDC in conditions where heat illness could be a potential problem. And that is going to be a problem for our outdoor sports. So for me, it's a fine balance between making sure that we aren't doing something that's going to cause me to have to deal with another medical emergency further down the road.
That's helpful. Thank you. And then in terms of the screening, a couple questions. One, will this, I know that for school in general, the vaccination timeline got pushed back a little bit, I think, by the state. So I'm wondering if the updates and things will cover sort of making sure everybody is vaccinated with whatever they need to be vaccinated with. And then if someone is sent home because they have a temperature or something or have symptoms, for how long? Is it sort of the same as for admission to school? And then my last part of this one is the state Health and Human Services last week basically clarified that if, the symptom screening, if anyone in the family has those symptoms, that everyone in the family should quarantine for 14 days. So I'm wondering if that is causing us to revise any of our questions to ask about them or family members or something I wasn't sure how that might impact the way that we do our screening.
Okay, I may not remember all of the parts.
Sorry. Yeah.
For the vaccination schedule, vaccines aren't required to be reported on their athletic association physical because it's a requirement for their school attendance, which is a requirement for athletics. So by default, it gets passed down the line, if that makes sense. In terms of the screening questions, there is questions on there that does ask about their family and their interactions or something that may be going on within their family. So that question is already on there. And there was a third part, but I don't remember it.
It was, so if someone does have a temperature or something, or if they're sent home, how long do they need to skip practice?
If they have it would be a positive answer on their screening test that would disclude them from practice, they are immediately sent home. They cannot stay on campus. And there's a couple of different ways that it can go. They will have to get a doctor's evaluation. The doctor may say their symptoms are from something other than COVID, and we will address whatever that may be. You know, is it an ear infection? Is it, you know, something else? Then there is a process for if they have COVID symptoms, and there's a doctor's process involved in that. Then we also have a different tree we follow down if they are tested but negative. And then there's another decision tree that falls down if they are tested and positive. And in any regards, if we send somebody home with COVID-like symptoms, our process is to notify Mr. Johnson, who will notify the health department, and we will receive further guidance in terms of, is it that pod that is shut down, for how long, and things like that. Kind of the same way that we would handle a situation in the classroom.
Great, thank you so much.
Other questions or discussion from the board? I'm not seeing any.
I have a question, Ms. McKenzie. I'm sorry, my connection cut out a little bit, so I might have missed something. But when Dr. Danny mentioned on with the AC sign, he mentioned to Dr. Felder that there was like a list of recommendations he was providing to different school districts. And I'm just curious, are those recommendations similar, or do they match what Ms. Gaddy you were saying that the recommends about masks? Are we like picking from two different sets of choices, or do those things line up? And I just don't remember what he had referred to.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Doyle. So per my recollections, everything lines up. The only one that I'm not sure of, but we can easily circle back, would be regarding wearing masks during the practice.
I think it would be helpful for me also to know, I don't know how other board members feel, but I think knowing if that is in alignment would be helpful before a vote. Other board members? Ms. Smiley?
I do have one related, so it's about the masking. It's because we're in this conference with other districts that are choosing to have everybody wear masks when playing. Do we know whether there's any concern from those districts about playing against us? If that makes sense, since your mask really is there to protect other people.
Dr. Benjamin mentioned and I'm gonna get to your question, Ms. Smiley. Dr. Benjamin mentioned in the last meeting that he recommended that athletes wear masks throughout the practice, even through rigorous. Yes, so other districts, I mean, that's part of the conversation that the conferences are having, right? Like, what happens if one school district does not make kids wear masks and you visit another place? So really the home team has the discretion on whether or not they make the team wear a mask or whatnot. I hope that answered your question, Ms. Smiley, but there are some concerns.
It does, thank you.
Jason, could you, I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, clarify that we will also require students to wear masks during the competition, correct?
And that's what we're debating right now, Dr. Felder. Because on one hand, Ms. Gaddy is getting information from other organizations saying that they shouldn't. And then we heard from Dr. Benjamin that they should. And that's a decision we can make tonight.
Any other discussion from the board?
So my recommendation would be that we hug the higher threshold out of abundance of caution.
Yep, I personally tend to agree with that. It would certainly be more in my comfort level. So Dr. Felder, are you hoping the vote is going to happen now? I just want to make sure that I'm not calling it before there's any other presentation plans.
Well, the initial plan was that we'd have 2 more items to present, then we would take the vote with everything, but if you want to
That's fine.
focus on these,
Nope.
okay. All right, we'll stick with the original plan.
So can I just clarify one more thing here? So the recommendation here is that athletes continue to wear masks even during exercise or competition, but we would still have an exception for students who have a medical condition that for some reason they can't wear a mask. Is that accurate, or?
Well,
so I'll say I would be fine with that. I would prefer like a doctor's certification or something, you know, some sort of something indicating that.
Could that one item we come back to and maybe separate that out, because I would wonder what is the medical condition. On that one, I have a lot of questions. And so if maybe we separate that particular item from the decision-making process, we can get some more information and bring that back to the.
Great.
So Dr. Felder, I just want to confirm. So what you're saying is the recommendation is mask at all times, and then you'll come back with the exception discussion later?
That's correct, Mr. Atherton.
Thank you for clarifying.
Absolutely.
Ms. Davison?
And if I may just address the issue of exceptions for medical needs, and certainly requesting medical documentation is fine. And I think that's part of the district's plan, you know, for Plan B in general when students are returning to school. But legally, because some of these conditions may be disabilities, what we are required to do is consider each one and determine whether it can be safely accommodated. And the answer may be yes, or it may be no, depending on the activity and the, you know, the other measures that can be put in place. But we should not have a blanket rule that there will be no accommodations, because there could be a case where it could be safely accommodated.
Thank you, Ms. Davison. So, Dr. Felder, I think I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Gaddy. I would also like to thank Mr. Simmons and Mr. McCulley. Thank you so much. All right. So we are going to, next slide, please. So as we plan for reopening schools under Plan B, it is essential for schools to first know their start and end times before finalizing the instructional models and schedules that will govern their day. Tonight, we're going to present for the board's consideration proposed arrival and dismissal schedules at the elementary, middle, and high school tiers for Plan B. At the October 27th board meeting, schools will present their proposed plans for how they will stagger the return of students opting for in-person learning through Plan B, their instructional models, and any plans they may have for providing learning opportunities for small groups of students. So that part will come at the next board meeting. With regard to the proposed arrival and dismissal schedules, let me begin by saying safety and equity were prioritized in the development of these schedules, with principals working within and across tiers, as well as sharing these schedules with their staff for feedback. The guiding equity question in the development of each schedule was, is this schedule equitable for all students? With regards to safety, a number of important safety factors had to be considered when drafting arrival and dismissal times, including but not limited to all of the new time-consuming safety protocols for bus riders, such as the attestation, temperature taking, and mask checking processes before boarding the bus, as well as we anticipate slower onboarding due to social distancing. Buses will also need to be disinfected between each group of students. Once students arrive at school, whether by a bus or as car riders or walkers, There will again be an attestation, temperature taking, mask checking processes as well. There are also new time-consuming safety protocols for staff to include attestation, temperature taking, and masking processes. Additionally, to ensure ample time for bus pickups and drop-offs, the Department of Transportation requested a minimum of 1 hour between tiers for arrival to and departure from schools. So again, in addition to the equity question, there were a number of safety considerations that had to be considered as well. Tonight, we are honored to have 3 principals representing the 3 school tiers: elementary, middle, and high. We have Mr. Ron Roche, Principal C.W. Stanford Middle School. Of course, he's representing the middle school tier. We have Mrs. Jamie Bell Williams, Principal Central Elementary School. And you guessed it, she's representing the elementary school tier. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Stan Farrington, Principal at Partnership Academy. And that's right, he's representing the high school tier. Each principal will share the rationale for their tier's proposed schedule, some of the challenges they had to think through to ensure equity, and other information to help you understand why these are the schedules before you tonight. If there are no questions, I will turn things over to Mr. Roche.
Good evening, Board Chair, Ms. McKenzie, board members, Dr. Felder. Thank you for being the first of the list. It's like, I hope I do a great job. Otherwise, the others are going to look really good. So I appreciate this time. The other 2 administrators, Dr. Rockland, Dr. Roblek, also met. We talked about what would be best for our students. We looked at the time restraints as far as busing, how long it would actually take getting all of our students, the 50-50 as they come into the building, buses, car riders, and then the dismissal. We looked at some challenges that we had, knowing that our students really have not had really enough instruction time in mathematics and reading. That was a major priority. And so we looked at how could we offer reading and math at the middle school every day. And so what we looked at is kind of like the schedule that we have currently, is that, that we could do 55-minute cores, and really looking at our electives as well, 55 minutes. We listened to the doctor's report about how long lunch should be. So we figured out starting times and end times based on what we had heard from our bus garage about when they could appropriately be at our school. So with all of those parameters and all of those risks that we looked at and those challenges, also looking at how we could still offer instruction time and some support with our 100% remote students. And so we came up with the schedule, and within that time frame, that we truly feel like, with students starting to come to our building approximately about 8 a.m., anywhere between, we thought about 7:50, which is kind of what we had in the past, to 8:30, that we could get all of our students tested and made sure they fever free, ask them all the important questions, get them into their classes. We also looked at teachers, an appropriate time for teachers to come in a safe manner, doing all of our safety checks prior to them entering our building. So with all of that in mind, we felt like with students coming at 8, instruction starting at 8:30, maybe about a 35-minute lunch break in the middle, giving time to eat and give them some downtime walking around the campus, getting them out by 2 o'clock. We felt like we could really do a great job. Dismissal time and getting them on buses back into cars, getting them gone by 2:30. You can see in the notes that we would then do some remote learning support between 2:30 and 3:30, looking at that as a means to really support our off-campus students and ensure them some really good face time remotely, making sure that they have the opportunity to have support in that area as well. So what we offer to you is that we truly believe, with everything that's going on, that we could accommodate all of our students. We could ensure that with the new lesson design and those types of things and the relationships that we have in middle school, that we could accommodate within those time restraints.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roche. Board, any questions? Ms. Hauser?
Is remote learners, is that virtual academy or is that something else?
For us, it would be the virtual academy. Yes, ma'am. Those would be the 100% remote. Because we'd still be on an A-B schedule, we'd have our A week and our B week. So when we look at the instructional design, we looked at the 50% of the kids being on site, while the other 50% that are coming back would then still be remote. So we looked at those students as well. They would be Zooming in lessons more than likely with the teacher in their core classes. And so we looked at really ensuring that we have some type of consistency in their schedule. And for the middle school, it was really important for us to continue developing those relationships that we've already started. So our goal would be, if all works out, that the teachers, the students and the teachers that are there currently together, we would try to keep those in the same process. So that's why we have the hour. So the 100% remote could actually talk to the math teacher, get some explanation, then maybe move to a science teacher during that time frame as well. Because for a middle school, it's not like an elementary where they have just the one teacher plus the specials, or the high school where they have 4. We have 6. And at any given day, they'll have 5 teachers that they might be working with.
So, thank you so much, Mr. Roche. Ms. Hauser, if I could just add that at the next board meeting, the principals will come back and share those daily schedules and the instructional models that they will be using to meet the needs of all of their students.
Okay, so I'm just wondering if there's going to be, the virtual academy is separate or is it all one? And this schedule applies to the entire school population. So everybody's kind of on the same schedule and the remote learners get an extra hour. The virtual academy, I'd like to, wish we use the term, the virtual academy is getting an extra hour at the end, but they're blended into the rest of the schedule. Is that what I'm looking at?
So it may be, Mr. Roche, you're welcome to add any commentary, but we wanted to first just focus on these arrival dismissal schedules, because that is going to help guide what the daily schedule will look like. So those have not been finalized yet.
Okay. Okay.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions.
Okay, then we're going to move on to Jamie Bell Williams. I know she's here.
Good evening, everyone. First, I apologize for not being on camera, but I am joining from my car. I had a previous engagement. So following Mr. Roche and everything that he shared, the elementary principals considered much of the same. In terms of our proposed start time, our belief was that our traditional schedule of starting at 7:30 in the morning with the arrival of students did not allow for sufficient time for staff to arrive, be screened, and be in place to receive students all by 7:30. We also anticipate that the screening procedures will take a little longer for our younger ones, and that any delays in our process would have a negative domino effect on the bus schedule for middle and high schools. So with that, we considered having our staff continue to arrive at 7:30, which is our traditional arrival time. That will allow sufficient time for staff screening and preparation. We anticipate that will take about 30 minutes, especially for schools with larger staff. Our schedule would allow for an 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock dedicated time for our remote learners, to allow for teachers to provide individual check-ins, SEL support, and time to give an overview of the day's lessons, providing some scaffolding, and that students would then begin to arrive at 9 o'clock, be screened, and report to class to start the day at 9:30, and the 3 o'clock dismissal adheres closely to our traditional dismissal time.
Thank you, Ms. Bell Williams. Ms. Smiley?
I guess I'll ask this question now. I was surprised to see the middle and elementary switch. And Ms. Bell Williams, your explanation makes some sense to me. But I got an email today from a teacher that I thought made a very good point, which was that the elementary school students, the concern was about staff, but I think this applies to other working people too, who have elementary school age students who are going to need to ride the bus or something, and so are needing to the later bus times for elementary could be more challenging for that age because you're less likely to leave a first grader at home than you are a middle schooler to wait for the bus if you have to get to work somewhere in Durham or Raleigh at 9 or something like that. So I'm curious whether that was at all part of the discussion yet. It does sort of concern me in terms of this ordering of middle versus elementary. I hadn't thought of it.
Yes, that was considered, and we do recognize that that's going to be a challenge. What we thought is having elementary in the middle would perhaps allow for some cross coverage. We also recognize that one of the considerations now is that all students would have to have an adult with them at the bus stop. So it wouldn't necessarily impact elementary any more or any less than the middle or high.
That's helpful, Ms. Williams. Has there been any discussion about the possibility of before school care at the elementary level, since we know that parents will have to be at work?
It is something we are exploring. Cannot say with 100% certainty it's something we'll be able to provide, but we are exploring that as well as after school.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other questions? Oh, Ms. Miley.
I am curious. I know we've been talking to lots of other districts that are already doing Plan B. Have we talked about things like these start times and how other districts are handling that?
Yes, we certainly have reviewed schedules and had conversations. Again, in every district, it just varies. There's just a lot of differences, which is to be expected because every district, every tier is different. And so you're not going to find much consistency in terms of the rationale for why they made their decisions. It just varies, much like here. I mean, we did have it flipped at one point with elementary first. We tried adjusting the times. And this is where the principals landed and thought would work best for their tier, given the needs, particularly at elementary, as Mrs. Bell Williams mentioned. When you think about that group and their where they are developmentally, in terms of the time that it will take, it will probably be, we're anticipating based on what we've heard from other districts, a slower process. I mean, it will speed up as everyone gets accustomed to the process, but it tends to take longer at the elementary level. And then thinking about, because we also tried adjusting start times and have less time for with transportation. But when we think about our transportation schedule prior to this schedule, there were difficulties largely due to just very little time between pickups and drop-offs between the tiers. So, that was one of the issues. I came into the district exploring and realized that we're going to have to go back and look at our bell schedules when we get back to a more traditional way of instructing our model of instructing our students.
And do we think this is enough time at the elementary school level because for the arrival and screening? Because like the school that my kids go to, the kids take the entire half hour to flow into the building before school starts. And so I know we'll have half as or even fewer as many students, but have we pressure test? I know you've timed out how long all the screening will take. We think a half an hour will do it.
That's what we're predicting. Now, much like the start of the school year, things are always a little slow. The buses, everything in school, but and according to schools, districts that are currently in Plan B, it does speed up. You can anticipate people including the kids, getting into the routine of things. But initially, and so we had to take that into consideration. The thinking was we'd rather have more time and buffers between the tiers, not be pressured not when it comes to safety and not be as thorough because we're pressured to get to the next tier, and hence the hour between the tiers. Yes.
Can I just remind panelists to please mute in between when you're not speaking? And then I think we are ready to hear from Mr. Farrington. Thank you so much, Ms. Bell Williams.
Sorry. How are you? I'm sorry, I had a question.
Oh, go right ahead.
I just was curious about teacher breaks, when teachers get breaks in the schedule.
I'm sorry, Ms. Hauser, could you repeat your question, please?
What is the plan for teachers' breaks in the schedule?
Right, and so that again would be something that the schools will present at the next meeting. You will see the schedules, daily schedule, and all of that will be provided then. But it's, again, of course, our principals and our schools, so they're already thinking about it, but until they know their start and end times, those are the parameters and from which everything else will flow. So if you're okay with it, we will bring that to you in about 2 weeks. All right.
Mr. Farrington, take it away.
Okay.
Well, good evening, everyone. Much like all of our staff team of heroes, the high school principals spend a great deal of time focusing on developing the best possible schedule for an effective, efficient, and safe return. We process through how to best deliver instruction for both face-to-face learners as well as for remote learners. We took into account the different equitable considerations, such as transportation needs and student employment needs at the high school level. And we decided upon an 8:15 to 4:15 schedule for faculty and staff. Teachers are supporting students virtually from 8:15 to 10:15 when they come in. And the doors of the school will open at 10:30 sharp for all students, and students will be screened and then go directly to class. One of the things we considered, and it was a little bit of a challenge for us, was the half-day schedule, where students would end their day at lunchtime and take a to-go bag for lunch. However, Dr. Felder, as well as the ABC Collaborative, shared some safety concerns for students taking masks off on the bus to eat lunch. So they recommended a more supervised lunch. So we went ahead with the later start, later day ending, but we're ending our school day at 4 o'clock. In an effort to make sure that we cover all the bases for our students. I'm going to pause right there and allow you guys to ask whatever questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Mr. Atherton?
Is it a typo on the start time or student arrival and screening begins? They're the same time. All of the other schedules are about 30 minutes apart. This one is exactly the same time.
Are you referring to the high school schedule there?
Yeah, it says student arrival and screening begins at 10:30, but the start time of school starts at 10:30. All the other schools start 30 minutes apart, like elementary's at 9, start time's 9:30.
Gotcha. Well, our actual start time for class officially will be at 11. But there will be the screening process going on. We'll open the doors at 10:30. Students will be getting screened. Once they're screened, they can enter the building at 10:30 and go directly to class.
Okay, so it will be, the start time will be 11. The second question I had is, it's a big deal at high school to park. Is there plans for it to be free, or are we going to do some kind of collection of that? Or, I know that runs along with this to know how many people are in buses or self-transportation.
And Mr. Atherton, this is Jason Johnson. we have discussed doing some form of a prorate for the students.
Okay. But that'll roll out as part of all this, that the students will get a chance to do that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the last question I had wasn't specific to high school, but it goes along with something Sarah was talking about earlier, is that, you know, all of these require staff to be at site before any school opens for students. So if you're, you know, a teacher at high school and you're a single parent, I don't know how you get your child to elementary or middle school. There's no physical way because of the staff hours required isn't there soon enough. So are we considering how we're going to accommodate teachers? Because one of the benefits is, you know, you can have your child within our district, you know, even if you're out of district. So I'm just curious what the plans are for that. And I agree that working parents are going to have difficult with this as well. If there's not some accommodations for morning care of some sort.
Yes, and thank you for that question, Mr. Atherton. So yes, as stated previously, we are exploring before school care and after school care. So those are two, and as well as establishing supervised learning labs for staff. So
so the before school care would be for staff and parents outside as well. So
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the supervised learning labs would, you know, be for staff, specifically for staff.
Well, I was meaning the case, Dr. Felder, is say that you're a high school teacher and you have an elementary student that's
Oh, I see. Yeah.
and they need to be in the school.
Yep.
That's
Yep. Gotcha. Thank you for the clarity.
Sure.
Ms. Doyle?
Thank you, Mr. Farrington. I have a question about the start and end times as well, similar to Mr. Atherton. If it's 11 to 4, it's 30 minutes less instructional time. Is that accommodated somehow by, is that intentional because the work of high school students is more flexible or something, or about the total time of the day?
Yes. Well, the 2 hours before school will be, we're working out a schedule to give each student an opportunity to be supported, whether they are remote or in person. So they can they can log in between 8:15 and 10:15 to get some support if necessary.
So if I could also add, Ms. Doyle, thank you, Mr. Farrington, that so synchronous and asynchronous instruction would still be in play under Plan B. And I could also add that was a waiver from the state with regards to the typical required instructional hours because, you know, of the variances that are due to the state that we're in with regards to COVID-19. So students will continue to work synchronously and asynchronously.
Ms. Hauser? You're on mute.
On screening, who's going to be doing that? On the screening when kids arrive?
That will be a combination of teaching staff, teachers, support staff, nurses.
Okay, so asking teachers, okay.
Other questions? I am not seeing any. Thank you so much, Mr. Farrington.
Thank you, Chair McKenzie.
Okay. So thank you so much, Mr. Roche, Mrs. Bell Williams, and Mr. Farrington. Ask that you not go too far. We may have more questions, so hold on. But right now, we're going to shift to the next item on the agenda. And so again, thank you to our principals. Well done. We appreciate you so much. And so now that we've shared the proposed arrival and dismissal times tonight, we also want to share the proposed alternating week schedule for students opting for Plan B's hybrid schedule. Again, that's the in-person and remote learning, and the factors that will be considered when placing students in either cohort A or cohort B. So to share this information is Dr. Kathleen Dawson, Deputy Superintendent. Dr. Dawson.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Felder, and good evening, Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Stevenson, and board members. As our schools continue their preparations for Plan B, we present tonight the alternating week schedule for second semester. While the initial breakdown is by last name and in an effort to even out the number of students per cohort, that's how we initially are starting, are by alphabet. But please know that our principals with their school teams will be continuing to take into consideration additional factors as they create their cohorts, such as siblings and the diversity of learners in each cohort, keeping in mind what is in the best interest of our students. Each cohort will experience 9 weeks of in-person and 9 weeks of remote instruction with spring break, March 29th through April 2nd. Elementary families will have the opportunity to opt in or out of Plan B and the 100% remote virtual academy at the end of 9 weeks or the marking term, and we ask that secondary families commit to the remainder of the year since they have the choice of opting in or out of Plan B at the semester mark. The schedule will be very important not only for the academic scheduling, but also, of course, for the scheduling of our bus routes. So at this point, if there aren't any questions, we do request the approval of this schedule with the understanding that principals will adjust student cohorts outside of this letter breakdown. This is just a starting point for the schools, and of course, always in the best interest of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dawson. Ms. Smiley?
Are there any groups of students who are going all the time and not being in cohort A or cohort B, not alternating?
At this time, because that would actually technically fall under Plan A, we do not have any students scheduled to be attending other than our EC and pre-K students at this time.
Well, I guess my question was, that wouldn't be Plan A is my understanding. My understanding is that the difference between Plan A is maybe social distancing and like % capacity of the building. And so it might be that we have some spare, if we have only 55 or 60% of students who want to do this, right? And then you split them into 2 groups, you might have a little bit more than, depends on the building, but in some cases you might. And so I guess I was curious, if there were any groups of students. It sounds like the answer is no. Pre-K, EC special settings or separate settings, or any other groups of students that might be going every week.
And right now we're focused on creating our 2 cohorts to function in person and remote. And of course, until we know for sure the number of students returning and in which model that they're choosing, we're right now, because of ensuring the social distancing and the proper safe space and all of that planning at the school, we're not looking at the option to bring students in every day at this point.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to just say for the record that I hope that if our building capacity allows it and we are able to figure it out, that I think our earliest grades would really benefit from being there all the time, and that I had presented some creative ideas at earlier points about using multiple classrooms or using the cafeteria and some of those things. And so I just think that is an opportunity that I hope as we get capacity, we will continue.
And Ms. Smiley, one of the things that we are also keeping in mind is that families do have the option to opt in or out. And so if we plan one way and then we see that families actually want to return back to school from being all 100% remote, that we want to make sure that we have that space and capacity to do so, to allow students that. So those are some of the things that we're taking into consideration, but we do truly appreciate, because you have us a variety of very creative ways of thinking about things, and we are keeping all that in mind as we continue. So thank you.
I know it's complex and I appreciate your work.
Other board members? Ms. Hauser?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate Ms. Smiley's point. And it feels like a lifetime ago when we were looking at A, B, and C. But I think option B, the last 2 or 3 options were about bringing an entire grade back, not about bringing half of every grade back. And, there's even, I could imagine options where we might bring specific students back because they need more help, but bring them back all the time. And, hopefully I'm kind of hopeful that we might see some of that in our next meeting, but it would be helpful to see that we're accommodating our students that need that kind of consistent education as a priority before we rotate the rest through the AV cycle. So I don't know if there's a way to bring that forward.
And Ms. Hauser, we definitely are thinking about and talking about all those issues that you just raised. And one thing that we have learned throughout this whole process that has stayed constant is change. Is that, we've had to stay very fluid because there's a lot of ambiguity, and we're not, we're not writing anything off. We're trying to, just take a step at a time. And as we learn and as we, things are fluid. So we're not, staying so rigid. We can't stay rigid. So we're definitely keeping all those things in consideration. And even after, I think, what we've seen, right? Even after when we say we're going to do something a certain way, we get new information. We have new sources of data that says, what, maybe there's another way that might be better. But one thing that we do keep at the heart of every decision that we're making is what is in the safety of our students and our staff, and of course, what is in the best academic needs as well of our learners.
Do we have a process where let's put this in, and then we send it to go out through the schools and get reactions from schools and parents about what works, what doesn't work, and then tweak it to come. So take this as a first cut, but then come back and say, what, we're going to tweak it, and the final plan could look really different. But so if we said yes, let's go ahead with this tonight, does that give you the leeway so that you can do that exploration to say to really work with people on it,
yes,
work with our differences on it?
Absolutely. If it gives us that permission to do that, we absolutely can do that. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah.
Ms. Smiley?
Does anybody else have something? I don't know if anybody else had their hands raised, but I know I'd already asked a question.
I don't think so.
I want to ask about the alternating weeks. And I know very early on we had talked about alternating days, and then we moved to alternating weeks. And, I guess I've talked to a couple of teachers and seen a couple of comments from teachers thinking that the alternating days would be better from a sort of consistency, seeing all the students every week kind of standpoint. And I know that there are some advantages to alternating weeks that we talked about in terms of there's a slight edge in terms of safety, in terms of if somebody tests sick, then if a teacher is sick, then fewer students needing to quarantine potentially, and that it is less costly in terms of cleaning. But I am curious what feedback from schools has been about alternating weeks instead of the alternating date, like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, in terms of, it seems like the main advantage to being back in a school building right now. To me, if large numbers of our folks of students are going to be learning online every day, and the students in person are going to be in the Zoom too, everybody's going to be in the Zoom, but some of them will be in person with the teacher. It seems that in person, it's the social emotional connection piece that's the real value of in person. And to me, I would think that the being able to go into school every week as opposed to 4 days on and then 6 days off and then 4 days on might be better from that lens. That was so my question, I guess, is what feedback have we gotten from the schools? I know there's some principles on like what, when we think about this from sort of the learning lens, in addition to those others, does this, I know it's the presentation, so clearly it seems like the right recommendation, but I guess I'm curious what we see as sort of the pros and cons at this point.
Yeah, and of course others, and if the principals are on, they're welcome to, add. But one of the things that was the ultimate decision maker for us was student safety, student and staff safety. While there are pros and cons to both alternating weeks and alternating days, the one thing that we were hearing from our Department of Health officials, from our doctor through the Science Collaborative, the ABC Science Collaborative, it was the edge was that the alternating week was a safer option, and so that was that was the deciding factor as to why that option was chosen over the alternating days.
Yeah, and I thank you so much. And I remember that, and that was why I supported it like this summer when we were originally going to go in that direction, But I remember at that point the thought was it was like a slight edge. It was like a slight health edge. And so if there were big educational advantages, for example, to the alternative, I was wondering if that like weighed differently. Yeah, that was where the question came from.
Yeah. We appreciate that question, Mrs. Smiley. And as Dr. Dawson said, we will always hug or lean in the direction of greater safety, much like the mask with athletics. My recommendation is always going to be the higher threshold. If that gives us an edge in this state that we're in, I take the edge any day. Yeah. So, yeah.
Ms. Hauser?
I'm going to tag team with Sarah here. So in the spirit, I love the idea of hugging safety, so thank you for that. What I heard from Dr. Benjamin, what I hear a little bit, is that there's some safety in routine. And this is something we didn't look at last summer, or it wasn't in the models that came from DPI. But there is some safety, especially for young children, in routine and keeping people. And I had one parent tell me that if her student comes out of their pod, because they're in childcare setting, and if they're taken out of their pod in alternating weeks, they can't go back. They're going to be kept out. So there's a question about creating pods and safety around that. And so I just wondered if, and again, this is a starting point. It would be really helpful to have some idea of groups that really might be more safe, might be safer, might be safer if they were coming back every day, rather than alternating.
Other comments from the board? I am not seeing any, so I am wondering if there is a motion about the Plan A and B weekly schedule. Oh, should we go back to driver's education and athletics first?
Yes. So I would motion to approve behind the wheel driving for driver's ed.
Second. I have a motion from Mr. Atherson and a second from Ms. Stevens. Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherson?
Yes.
Motion approved. driver's education will start behind the wheel. Everyone, please be careful, wear your mask, sanitize your hands, open the windows. Make us glad we made this decision.
And drive safely. Don't forget, drive safely.
Yes, drive safely. Do I have a motion about athletics?
So I'd like to make a motion to approve athletics with masks being required.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Atherton and a second from Ms. Smiley. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Wear your mask, sanitize your hands, bring your hand bottles. Water bottles, I mean. Okay, motion approved. Athletics are...
And wear your helmets.
Be safe out there, everybody. Ms.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
A quick question so that, because I know we'll have, so the motion was to approve it with masks being worn at all times. Is that meaning not removed during strenuous exercise? Is that correct?
Yes.
All
Yes.
times.
Correct.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Our next vote is about Plan B arrival and dismissal schedules for elementary, middle, and high schools to, yes. So I'm just going to keep reading there, but that's the vote. Do I have a motion around that?
I move that we approve the middle, elementary, and high school dismissal schedules as presented.
Do I have a second?
Yes, second. This is Brenda.
I have a motion from Ms. Doyle and a second from Ms. Stevens. Mr. Atherton?
Yes, with the expectation of the before school care coming back to us.
Got it. Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
All righty, we have approved Plan B and arrival and dismissal schedules, and we hope to see before school care coming back before us, please. Okay, so the, yes.
I would just like to add another request in there. It doesn't have to be part of the motion. I'm not so comfortable with our teachers being expected to do screening beforehand, and I wondered if we could also get an estimate of what additional staff costs might be if we have to hire people. We're not using our teaching staff to do those screenings. So I just wanted to open the door for alleviating.
I would like to see that as well.
Okay, I'm sure Dr. Felder will be happy to look into that. Yes, okay. Thank you, Ms. Hauser. So the final vote for this evening, before we have a few more information items, but it is around the AB cohort alternating week schedule from elementary, middle, and high, and for when we open in Plan B. Do I have a motion for that?
Maybe
Ms. Hauser?
Maybe Sarah can help me shape this. I'd like a motion. I'd like to, I want to give the district the leeway to go ahead and continue their planning. I don't want to get in the way, but I'd like to include, the planning to include space for cohorts that bring entire groups of students back full time. So it doesn't have everybody on a hybrid schedule. It includes cohorts that come back, without alternating. So do I need to say that, or do we just assume that is going to come as part of the planning process?
Ms. Jubison?
So there's a couple of ways that you could do that. One would be for, if you're inclined to approve this schedule and then just let it be known that if the staff wants to request exceptions to, they've noted that pre-K and EC will already be exempted from the cohorting, but if there are others that they want to, that they could bring it back to you. The second way would be to make a motion to approve this schedule and include and authorize the administration to approve additional days for small groups, if they should, or basically authorize them to do so, period.
I like that. So approve the schedule and authorize with an authorization for the staff to bring back cohorts full-time if that makes sense.
I assume, though, consistent with the social distancing requirements listed under B.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Hugging safety.
So I have a motion from Ms. Hauser. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second. We have a motion from Ms. Hauser and a second from Ms. Smiley. Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle? Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I will vote yes. And Ms. Smiley?
I will vote yes. And if it looks like there is a shift in which of these plans would be better, the alternating days or the alternating weeks, I hope you will bring up back a different recommendation if that shifts for you.
Okay, well, motion approves. Thank you, everyone. We made some big decisions tonight. Ms. Hauser?
I have a third request, and it's not on, and that's I would like to see a plan for virtual academy.
No, noted. We can probably add that to the agenda for the next meeting. I can discuss that with Dr. Felder. Unless you have something else you want to add, Dr. Felder.
No, you will get that at the next meeting. That's part of the instructional models that we're working on. Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So Hillary,
Mr. Atherton? Yep.
just a comment on that. I would like to make sure we bring back, when we have that discussion, the number of teachers that have just virtual and the numbers that are mixed. And if we could have that by grade, school, however, because I think that's the important discussion that most of us are concerned with, and does that occur? So I just wanted to add that in, as that's part of the data I would like to see, just to understand.
Yeah, so what I can say, Mr. Atherton, we will bring you what we have at that time, but until we do that final survey for families and find out where people are with regards to who's, Plan B hybrid, who's 100% virtual academy, because there may be some changes. So we can give you to date, we will do that. Yeah.
That's fair.
All right. Yeah. No problem.
Ms. Hauser?
If I could add, as you work on the planning, and thank you, so I'm so happy we're moving this forward. If certain options deliver higher quality education, more equity, better social emotional learning, but it costs more, we'd like to hear that option. So I don't want to assume that we're constrained by the budget as it is, or by the constraints, but if things will cost more, I'd rather hear what the option is, and so that we can decide to invest more in higher quality education. But we really want to have those choices too.
Okay.
All right. Anything else before we move on? All right. Well, then we will move on to building ventilation.
Indeed, we will, Chair McKenzie. So on Friday, the board received a report providing information on the district's HVAC systems drafted by the district's operations department. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Danny Williams, Chief Operations Officer. Dr. Williams.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, board members, superintendent and her cabinet, and all in attendance. Tonight, we'd like to share with you some information in reference to the HVAC ventilation. And I'm going to ask Mr. Nick Mincy if he would come on and share with you a summary of the information that we shared previously. And Mr. Nick will take it from here. Thank you.
All right. Is there an additional slide there, Danny, or am I looking at it?
That would be it, Mr. Mincy, but we do have in there, oh, there you go. Yeah, there's a link to open up the document. So there you go.
Okay. So we were asked to give an informational overview of the systems that we have in place. And one of the big questions was about air changes per hour, or ACH. And so from a summary standpoint, we wanted to try to prevent information about all the systems in the entire district. It's very difficult to look at a single metric and compare all of the buildings in our campus. There's multiple pages here, and I'm definitely not going to sit here and read all of this to you, as I'm sure many of you have, hopefully, many of you have had a chance to look through it, but it is a very brief but extensive overview of all the different types of systems that we have through the district. And I tried to cover every campus and tried to show extremely specific items in relation to ventilation and air movement through the buildings. So there, if you just sit and look at it as it's breezing by, it's just showing pictures of all the different types of air handling equipment that we have, and we have many. And as this report notes, there's many at all the buildings. Some buildings have as many as 5 different types of operation systems. So having said all that, there is a summary at the end of that. And basically it goes into just documenting that we have many different types of systems, and it's extremely difficult to be able to determine an ACH per each location. I'll just give a really specific example. Grady Brown is one school that is an extremely difficult school to look at the ventilation just for a specific ACH number or air exchange number. And the reason being is because the classrooms in that building have no doors. So if you've been to that campus and walked through, you realize that all the classrooms are all open to the common areas, and not even sure exactly how the metric would look to establish what the ACH is for that campus. So having said all that, maintenance and facilities, I think at this point, if we want to really go in depth with an ACH evaluation for our campuses, it would be something that would need to be outsourced. And I've put a quick list of items there, a way of protocol that we could work through to establish that. We need to determine existing system status, which we have already been doing. I do want to assure the board that we don't have a lot of HVAC techs in the district. I'll just put the cards on the table here. We have 3 HVAC techs in our district, and they do a really good job. Between Roger Ivy and myself, our list of maintenance items for HVAC is endless. I guess you guys know the numbers. We have 1.4 million square feet of buildings, and we have 3 technicians basically to service the majority of that equipment. And I do say that we do outsource. We have multiple contractors that help us with the projects that are either above our task or we don't have equipment to provide. But it's a pretty big task to keep up the ventilation and air conditioning in our system. So we have been working diligently on keeping the systems up. We have definitely looked at the fresh air on the systems that we have. We are well aware of when staff starts to return and the buildings start to reach load and capacity, as in HVAC terms, we call the building being loaded. Once those numbers start to develop, then we can make adjustments to fresh air. We do have those abilities, and we'll work towards that. So I did put together, like I said, a short list of steps of existing system status, and we need to develop an assessment strategy This is something that's going to take some really in-depth planning, looking at it by building by building. Our district ventilation performance, we really need an ME to be able to prepare that. Mechanical engineering firms, that's their specialty, and that's where we would need assistance. There is a process we have to go through to hire an ME. As a public facility, we do have to go through that process. We'd have to develop our budget. We would have to come up with the scope. We'd have to do an RFQ, request for a quote for ME. There's several items that we will have to work through as a team in order to be able to produce an accurate ACH for our capacity, for our buildings and our campuses. So then once all that's in place, if the information comes back and warrants adjustments or warrants whatever metric needs to be developed, then we have to develop what the budget's going to be to move forward with that portion of actually physically implementing the design. So there's a lot of information there. The last page, you see a summary at the bottom, and I'll be completely honest. We have been working with a local firm in Durham, SUD Associates, and I garnered a little bit of information from him for this report. We are currently hired out to SUD to help us with mechanical work on other projects in the district currently. So he was willing to help give us some information. His name is Ish Sud, and he is very, very bright and extremely thorough. And we have come to have a very good working relationship with his firm. There are other firms that our district has worked with as well, and we certainly could reach out to them when the process, or if the process is deemed to move forward by the board. I estimated some engineering costs just to develop design parameters and to try to move forward. And you see that in that last page on that summary. These numbers are nothing more than just an appraisal or an estimate. The test and balance, the summary item number 2 is test and balance assessment. And we did base that number off of the current cost that we have from the project at Cedar Ridge High School. And typically test and balance, which measures airflow, that test and balance cost is done typically by the square foot. So we feel we could get a better rate because the square footage for the entire district would be very large compared to just one addition at Cedar Ridge. But you can see an approximate number for that assessment work. And then looking at design costs, working with SUD now on other projects, this price range would fall somewhere in the $100,000 to $250,000 just to do the assessment to potentially move forward based off the design from the test and balance. And then the last item would be determining what we would actually spend if we determined we needed to do physical changes to the systems. So that's a lot of information. And I'll open that to questions. If I'll try to answer them the best I can.
Smiley? You're on mute.
Oops, I was muted. Mr. Mincy, first, I just want to say a huge gratitude to you and to anyone else who helped work on all of this information about just to help the board understand what do we have in place across the system, how does it work? I know a lot of these questions are things that probably have never come up before. And so just really appreciate all the work that you've put into this for sure. And that is expensive and maybe is worth it in terms of preparing for a future bond or something like that. But seems like in the short term, it would be, it wouldn't necessarily, the sort of assessment and figuring out all of this. I don't think that it would necessarily address like our short-term problems or questions, short-term questions about adjustments in the short term. And so just an alternative idea on this in terms of the short term, in terms of understanding that the air changes per hour is to understand sort of the, when the CDC says like, avoid spaces that are poorly ventilated, like do you have a poorly ventilated space? How does our ventilation sort of compare to that standard? And so that was sort of the one recommended way of doing it. My understanding is that another way to understand if you have sort of adequate ventilation is to measure CO2 levels. And I think, I'm not sure if Ms. Pitts is on the phone, but I believe that CO2 levels are part of the assessment that we do with the indoor air quality company twice a year. And so, and you can buy a CO2 meter for like $50 at Home Depot and, you know, put that into a room once we're into rooms and figure out where there might be spaces that need a little bit more ventilation or something like that. So just, I'm not sure if you have any thoughts about that, but I guess I had a reaction, which was this maybe we want to do and should consider for like a future bond. And maybe there's sort of an easier way or cheaper way to get in the sort of short term do we have like adequate ventilation in our spaces?
Okay, so kind of a two-part question. I'll do my best to answer. So first and foremost, I feel very confident with the systems that we do have. The systems that we have in place, they function. Yes, some of them are old. Yes, some of them do have a problem on a day-to-day basis. Yes, staff members do fill out work orders and send them to us, and we send texts out as rapidly as we possibly can. Typically, though, the work orders that we receive are more related to temperature than they are to air exchange. One thing that's really important to understand about commercial air conditioning systems is that they typically run all the time. If you're ever at Cedar Ridge, you'll never hardly even know, but the air conditioning and the fans and the ventilation in that building never turns off. The only variable in that campus is either we need cooling or heating, so the hot water coils come on or the cold water coils come on, and the air blowing across that is continuous. Multiple campuses that we have that exact same function. Orange High School, Cedar Ridge, Stanford, Gravelly Hill, New Hope, AL Standback. So we have many, many campuses. That's the way they function. And even some of the older campuses have fan coil units at a window. Yes, maybe not the largest air circulation in that space, but the fans in those can run continuously and circulate air, whether it needs heat or cooling. So a long way to answer that question. Yes, I feel very confident in the systems that we have. I think the systems that we have will filter air, and we have filtration in them. So in the short term, yes. Sarah Pitts for Environmental Safety and Health, she has a really nice meter actually that measures CO2, much more than $50. And I will say this, please do not trust a $50 meter from Home Depot. The ones that we use are thousands of dollars, and we have to have them continually calibrated. And so, you know, those devices, we can measure those rooms once student capacity is there and determine what those levels are in those spaces. And I do know that Sarah does that, and also Dr. Curcio's firm.
Thank you. That's good advice about the $50 version. And it's great to know that we have some. And I'm hoping also, yeah, that maybe there's some existing information in his reports about what those levels are. The level that I saw was 1,000 something. Sarah Pitts will know much better than me as sort of a adequate ventilation level. So perhaps there's some way for us to just use that once spaces are occupied to sort of quickly make our way through, especially the schools where we're least sure, or maybe older systems, or, you know, we have the most complaints or something like that, and use that in a shorter term to understand if there are certain rooms that need a window open more often, or if there are certain parts of the building where we need to adjust the fresh air or something like that. I don't know. That's just my thought there is, it seems like understanding, it's clear that like understanding air exchanges per hour is incredibly complicated, but it may actually just be as simple as measuring the CO2.
Okay.
Ms. Hauser and then Mr. Atherton.
I don't know how you do this stuff, but I have a question about the overall approach, and I wondered if there's a way for us to prioritize it differently and to focus on the older schools. And it's not, it's really, I mean, there's virus and air circulation in a particular room, but our schools do have some problems with, as you mentioned, heating and cooling and kids wearing coats in the morning in school and things like that. And I just wonder if is there a way for us to take a look at older schools, to take a look at smaller spaces, particularly the small offices in buildings, maybe the smaller classrooms, and say, what can we do? Because I don't know if this is true, but we just spent a small portion of money redoing the whole HVAC system at Cameron Park. So is it reasonable to think that the air circulation is going to be okay there? We have a brand new wing at Cedar Ridge. Is it reasonable to assume the circulation is okay there? Bradley, some of our pathways, these are newer buildings. Is it reasonable to assume that the circulation will be better there? I don't know the answer to that, but I just wondered if there's a way we could prioritize based on the nature of the space and based on the age of the building.
So yes, there are some ways that we could prioritize that. We certainly can look at the amount of airflow from the equipment that is in a space. For example, a window unit or a fan coil unit that is mounted to the wall of a classroom under the window, that circulates air through the base of the unit and out of the top of the unit. And that airflow, yes, is less than a space where it has fully conditioned air. But don't necessarily discredit the older schools. For example, Eflin Cheeks has rooftop air conditioning units. Those rooftop air conditioning units have fresh air makeup that's drawn directly into the unit and brought directly into the building to provide air exchange. So even though Eflin is older, it does have an excellent way of providing fresh air into the space. It also shares a plenum ceiling area, so the air is exchanged through that overhead ceiling area, returned to the unit, filtered, and brought back to the space. So, but yes, ma'am, we certainly can look at areas that we know maybe the airflow is slightly less than it is in other areas. Yes, we can do that.
That's great. It's really interesting that you say that about Eflin in particular, because does that fresh air circulate into all the spaces? Or, I'm thinking about the smaller offices and some of the, I'll call them adaptive spaces that are now being used for offices. They were used for storage in the past. So, but are there certain space, even though there's more fresh air coming into the building, are there certain spaces where it may not be getting to? So just to throw that in there.
Yes.
Thank you. That's great.
Yes, and that has definitely been brought to our attention. And there are some areas that, yes, have become creative learning environments over time that we definitely need to look at. Yes, that is correct.
Ms. Doyle, did I see your hand up?
Yes, and thank you, Ms. Mincy. So my understanding, and Ms. Smiley has provided a lot of information over time as well, but looking at the CD, so like air changes per hour, the lower the number is, like if you're 2, it says it takes a little over hours to remove of contaminants. So you want to have a higher, so that it's less time for contaminant. And so like, do you have like a want to be at, and thinking of the number that you like consultant fee or the evaluation fee was my understanding, the 40,000 to 100,000, if I remember that correctly. Would that be the cost of having all 14 buildings evaluated? So as well, would it make sense to have our 3, for example, buildings that are one I think might be most at risk of having poor air circulation, and have those evaluated to see if they meet our threshold, so to speak? And maybe they all do, and we can stop there.
Ms. Doyle, you're buffering a lot.
Okay, is that better with my video off?
Yes.
That is better, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, as someone else had mentioned, does it make sense to look at maybe our 3 most at-risk buildings maybe if they have problems, those are the ones we need air purifiers in, or maybe they're all fine and we can stop there. Is there a recommendation to do a minimal look or evaluation?
So yes, I would certainly say that is one approach that could be used. And yes, there's two things that are really important. The source about the ACH that Ms. Smiley had put in her questionnaire, I really want to make sure that we understand the difference between ventilation and filtration. When it comes to ACH, it really appears that the numbers or the calculations for ACH deal much greater with filtration than they do with ventilation. So what we have to be very careful of is the filtration in that space typically would lead more to a purifier than it would to an HVAC system or a conditioned ventilation system. So that's why we really need a professional to be able to tell us, even though we have extremely high airflow in a space, maybe we're not getting the ventilation or the filtration that we need. We could have a space that has minimal airflow, but our filtration is higher. And that's simply due to the type of filter that's in that equipment in that space. And those things are scientific metrics we just can't really pull out of the air. Nobody wants to see a great answer to this any more than myself. And I just think we really need a professional to give us some advice.
Mr. Atherton?
So I know that the air changes per hour are very important, but one of the other items that I know we have struggled with in the district is humidity removal, right? Because the systems weren't designed for that. And although we're headed into the winter and less likely to do that, I think anything we do, we need to also consider that, because we hear about mold and we go clean it up and then we remove it, and we put in the industrial dehumidifiers in the buildings to do that. And I know with Cameron Park, some of that was looked at as part of this new system. But I just would think if we're going to spend money to do this, we should also consider looking at the dehumidification for the generality of the air quality.
Yes, and I can comment a little bit on that. So we have made some significant strides in the district, and a large majority of that is in roofing. We have been doing roofing projects, and I'm sure that the board and many of the staff know, but we have been doing roofing work like crazy. As a matter of fact, we have all new roofs on multiple campuses over the last 3 years, and we have, the reduction in leaks, the reduction in humidity problems are starting to wane away at those campuses. We have made significant strides in HVAC. The operations and maintenance department, we have changed schedules on our equipment, Mr. Atherton, to do things like running the boilers on off hours so that we can dehumidify the building when nobody's there, and then bringing cooling back up in the mornings by our scheduled equipment before staff arrives. You never know that the heat ran for 2 or 3 hours overnight, but that little bit of time is really dehumidifying a lot of those spaces. So we're really pushing on dehumidification, and that is a very serious concern to us. And that's another item, that we really need professional assistance on, making sure. I agree.
I agree. That's why I'm saying if we're going to spend money, I think we should include that as part of the overall air quality, because it will be a problem right when we get back to it warming up again.
Yes, sir. And fortunately, we are headed to the right time of the year to be able to crack a window a little bit and get some fresh air exchanges.
Ms. Smiley?
Could I just request, and I think this is to Ms. Pitts, that you send the board the report from I can't remember his name right now, indoor air quality specialist who does the evaluations twice a year. I know that there was one this spring, but I think the one from October while the buildings were occupied is probably a better gauge, is my guess.
Yes, he has conducted one in the spring. He has not yet conducted the audit for October because he had knee surgery, I believe. So it had to push back his ability to walk through the buildings. But we will get that scheduled right away while we are still in high humidity season to make sure we can see any areas where we may be high. And as Mr. Mincy has said, a lot of the repairs that we have done, especially with Cameron Park and the new HVAC systems there and in New Hope, have helped control some of the humidity issues that we have seen in the past.
Great. Yes. No. What I meant was, could you send us the one from last October last year? I'm most interested in understanding this like CO2 level issue. So, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I can tell you that all audits that we do when there's a complaint, CO2 is one of the things that we track. So Dr. Curcio tracks CO2, and anytime we do an audit in a room, that is the one thing we track is CO2. And we will track it when the students are in the building and about an hour after they leave to make sure that the fluctuation, we can capture air returning and make sure that it's not impacted by the students being in there, that we get an actual reading of when it should have turned over, and we can see how long it takes for the CO2 to exhaust that area.
That's great. I feel like that would be really valuable information. And I'm sure Ms. Pitts knows this because this is like her specialty area, but you all, when I was looking into just ventilation, that like the effects of us doing this well and making sure our spaces are well ventilated goes so far beyond COVID. There are impacts on student attendance rates, staff and student respiratory health, and academic performance. Like statistics, like there are these like meta studies where they pull together all the studies, and like there are very strong impacts on things like student performance if we make sure our spaces are well ventilated. And I know this is something you are always looking at, but it just feels extra important right now.
Other comments from the board? I do not see any. So, Mr. Mincy, or I'm not sure who's controlling the screen. Could we go back to the different sort of options we have? Thank you. I think that will be helpful. Board, is there discussion about what we would like to do? Does anyone have specific motion in mind?
I would move. I'm interested in, I think that this looks very expensive and will take a longer window than to address this plan, but I would be really interested if we start to look at building improvements in seeing something like this come forward at a future date. What I would like to move, I'm interested in us having a plan and staff coming back with a plan to measure and adjust according to CO2 levels in classrooms once we have people back in the building. So that's my motion, that staff would develop a plan before we go back into buildings to be evaluating building classroom and space ventilation using CO2, and then identifying in places that fall under that threshold ways to address the ventilation.
And can I add one thing to that?
Please.
And then Ms. Stevens.
One thing that I wanted to mention is that we do have filters ready for an exchange prior to student return. We have them at the ready to make those exchanges before the 2 weeks before kids come in. Takes us a hard week to change all the filters at every campus. We'll have that done before we load the buildings up again. So that will be a good baseline metric with the students coming back and testing carbon dioxide. That will all be good.
Mr. Mincy, does that mean that filters are about to be exchanged in the next week or so, since we have EC and pre-K coming back on the 27th.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Yeah, well, my only concern is that, you know, Sarah asked for that report, and, you know, we have our students returning in about 3 weeks, 2 weeks. I mean, so is that enough time for them to do? Because I know we talked about layering additional work. Is that enough time for Mr. Mincy's staff to do what Sarah has asked?
So as far as sending the spring and fall IAQ reports, I can have that to you in the board update on Friday. I have all of that on hand. With recording the CO2 levels, we will not be able to do that until we get full buildings. So
Right.
unfortunately, with the load of just the teachers coming back in December, it won't be an accurate count. We won't be able to measure CO2 in the way it fluctuates with a full load and student population in until they're actually in their seats and in the building.
But would you be able to measure it in a classroom, like a sort of a small scale of what we would be doing on a larger scale later, or is that?
Oh, we can absolutely start taking baseline measurements right now. Yes, just to see if they're running high. But again, we could focus on EC, but and even but the numbers that will be in attendance now based on a full load are going to be drastically lower. So I don't know that that will give you a true reading.
Ms. Hauser? Oh.
I guess I'm a little confused because I thought that there was a report, it's not here, that talked about bringing small air purifiers in. That was talking about doing it in every classroom, but I wondered about some of these spaces that we know are not well ventilated, small offices, some classrooms. But, you know, that was a short-term, I would not say inexpensive, but affordable fix that could be done now. And I wonder, is there a reason we're not talking about that as a possibility, an action we could take right away before school opens?
Ms. Hauser, thank you for that concern. That is a part of our presentation as well. After we're done with this particular presentation, we have some additional information to share with you. And that includes the purifiers.
So should we hear all of it before we vote on anything?
Well, when we're done with this, we'll go right into the next.
Yeah, let's do that. I'd like to hear the whole thing before we.
Okay, I'll withdraw that motion and we can talk about the whole set of things at the end.
Very good.
All right. Thank you. So next, the operations team will talk more about ventilations as we go into the cost estimates for air purifiers and there are 4 items that we will present to you. All right. The first that you see there would be air purifiers. And these are portable units that will be placed in the nurse's office, isolation rooms, and classrooms. We have approximately over 500 classes. And so therefore, if you're talking about every classroom, we, in addition to the nurses' offices, isolation rooms for those who are not well, we do have some purifiers on hand that will cover the nurses in isolation rooms. But therefore, you see that we would need approximately 503 purifiers. Cost is about $900 each for a total cost of $452,197. And we need replacement filters for those. So at $190 each, that will be a total of $95,570. A total of, with shipping, $551,267 for the air purifiers in every classroom. We will also, again, cover all of the isolation rooms, all of the nurses. So the operations department strongly recommends the purchase of these purifiers for all schools. health and safety precautionary measures. So that's the first of those. And I'll pause if there are questions or comments on this before I go into the next one.
Mr. Atherton and then Ms. Hauser.
So what is the sound level that these devices would make? Do we know? The main reason I'm asking is, some teachers will be teaching and, trying to have people remote in some cases, just is this going to be a case where they're going to have to turn them off and then on, or do we believe the dB levels will be reasonable to be able to teach in the classrooms?
Thank you. My understanding is that what we've been looking at has a quiet motor to it, which has also speeds. So what we would do is encourage teachers to use the lower speed while they have classes going on. And when they go out for recess or go to pick up their lunch or whatever they do, when they're out of the classrooms, switch it to a higher speed so it can purify more so while they're out of the classes.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Ms. Smiley. Oh, I'm sorry, I had Ms. Hauser first and then Ms. Smiley. Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, I just kind of the same question that I asked Mr. Mincy, and that's priority. Do we need this in all the classrooms, in the smaller offices? Can we put smaller units? And I don't want to micromanage it now, but I wondered if we took a deeper dive into this, would the price go up or would it go down or stay roughly where it is?
Okay. One of the things that you might want to consider is simply having a purifier in all nurses' offices and the isolation rooms. Definitely we need them there. And I can't say about if you want it in every classroom, because I mean, for equitable purposes, one teacher's classroom would need it as simply as much as another. But if you want to stick strictly to the isolation room and nurses' offices, then that could be an option as well.
Yeah, and I guess I was wondering if there's some buildings with better ventilation than others. It's just a question of taking a look at it. I don't need to answer now. I just was curious if we took a more precise cut at this, if the cost might come down a little bit.
So one thing, if I can interject, due to the funding source for this and due to the cost for this item, we would have to prepare an RFP. That would have to go out and we would have to research cost in depth. The price that you see before you is the price of the units that we currently have on hand. So we just use that as a starting point. We have a very high quality air purifier on hand that we use now. Those units have multiple speeds. They have extended fan and filter life. They are very quiet and are easily relocated. They have a lot of advantages, but we would still have to put out an RFP and determine what the best price and the best cost point would be for this item.
Right, and the nature of my question is how many do we need? It's not which one, but do we really need 500 or do we need 250 or something else, because all our spaces don't really need it.
Yes.
That's the question.
Absolutely, I understand.
So Ms. Dubison, then Ms. Smiley, then Ms. Doyle, and then I have a question also.
I just want to note that since this is a purchase of a size that, as he mentioned, would need to be bid and also a contract that would need to come back to the board, it would be possible, if you were inclined to approve it, to ask, to approve putting out a bid for this, but then it would still come back to you for the final approval of the contract to purchase it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do we know this particular unit? Do you know what the clean air delivery rate is for it? And if you don't off the top of your head, could somebody email that to me later?
I'm sorry, I've not memorized that, but we can get that for you.
Thank you, Mr. Mincy. My other thought is, and I think this may be building off of what Ms. Hauser said, you know, I know a number of people in the district who work in former closets. And those spaces, I don't think would need as powerful, you could get a smaller unit that was much less expensive, hopefully. But in terms of the total units we need, I would encourage us to count up those kinds of rooms too and figure out if there's a different tier of air purifier needed for some of those spaces. Because being in like really close quarters like that, it seems actually really important.
Yes, we can develop a varied scale for the size of the units.
Mr. Atherton?
So my question is really around the funding of this. Are there COVID dollars that we could use to pay for this, or is this strictly out of our general fund?
Hi, Mr. Atherton. Thank you for asking that question. This is Rhonda. At this level of cost, no. We would be looking at our local fund balance. We do have some COVID funds from our federal source, but it is not enough to cover this full purchase. And also, you know, we had set aside, had budgeted those funds for a lot of the PPE and some other things that we have that are continuing. So to answer your question, no, it would need to come out of our local fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Doyle?
I'm wondering if it makes sense. So like if you had an air purifier and 2 filters, that's $1,200. 13 for the 13 nurse rooms is $16,000. Another 13 for the isolation, $16,000, and maybe one for an office space for each building is another $16,000, totaling $50,000. Does it make sense to have, especially considering these might be in supply, to have a minimum of 3 per building? And could we fund that differently and then do the larger bid for the classroom volume?
Can I tag something on to that, Ms. Doyle? Would you mind? You're buffering. Let me know when you can hear. You're on mute now, Ms. Doyle.
Yeah, you're fine. I just was having trouble muting and unmuting, but yes, go ahead.
Okay, so my question is similar to that. I am worried about our EC classrooms where we know some of the students aren't going to be able to wear masks. And we know that in our pre-K classrooms, some of those children are going to be napping and probably can't wear masks while they're asleep at that age. And so to Ms. Doyle's point, could we order for the nurses for in any spaces in particular, we know we have to have them in the building right away, and go ahead and supply the classrooms where we have students coming back soon? I would be very comfortable making that order now and then placing, you know, getting an RFP or RFQ and working on the bigger order. Do other board members have thoughts on that, Ms. Doyle?
That seems like a great idea to me. I think they were saying we have some of them.
I'm sorry, Ms. Doyle, I didn't hear you because Sarah was talking.
Yes, I think that makes sense. I hadn't thought about the EC classrooms, the pre-K, but I think that makes sense to add on.
Mr. Mincy and Dr. Williams and Ms. Pitts, do you think that we could order, I don't know the exact number of those, but do you think that we could place that order without an RFQ, or do you think that we would have to wait and go through the bigger process for that many?
So my logical side of me wants to inventory the spaces so that we can determine the size of the spaces and determine the size of the units for those locations. And then in addition to that, I really would like to look at the current ventilation in those rooms, because some of the locations that EC and pre-K are in have pretty good air conditioning systems, and we could look at that as a whole and everything has an operable window, but we do need to look at the overall ventilation in each space, I think is an appropriate way to do that. So in long and short answer to your question, yes. Even in these times, these manufacturers have ramped their production up tremendously. And I don't have exact timelines on the ordering from these, but we have been asking what their turnaround time is. And there are units available in different sizes. We just have to make sure we get to the right vendors.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mitzi. I see Ms. Crimmins has popped on, so I'm gonna ask her to chime in if she would like.
Thank you, and I appreciate the consideration for the EC classrooms, because I do think there are some that would be helpful, but I would always default to the operations department for their expertise. I do want to mention that Mary Ellen Golnick, my assistant director, well, not mine, but the assistant director for the EC department, has been working fast and furious to figure out if we can still maintain our NC pre-K monies and not have to have students in the building during nap time. We are working to get approval for that, and that we just need one more approval from the state agency in order for students to maintain their 6.5 hours of instruction. The in-person would be the skills, the concept building, the pre-academics, literacy and math, and then the asynchronous to make up the remainder of the 6.5 hours would be nap at home, outdoor playtime, and any other asynchronous activities, read a book with your parents. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'll have an update for you as soon as we know.
Thank you, Ms. Crimmins. That is helpful. Board members, thoughts? So I wonder if we would want to have a motion to authorize staff to order the air purifiers as they feel appropriate, and then like report back to us, but for those spaces in the short term, to make sure that we have those available when students come back if they feel like it's necessary in those spaces. Because I do just really think that an air purifier in spaces where we know we're going to have less mask compliance, 4-year-olds are going to rip their masks off sometimes. You just know they are. And I personally would love to see air purifiers as a default in those spaces, but I'm curious to see what other board members think about that. Or a different motion.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I'll second that. I thought we were going to hold on all the motions until the end, but.
Oh, no, I mean, I didn't necessarily mean that had to be the motion, but.
So Ms. McKenzie, if I'm not mistaken, and Rhonda can provide more information, but if balance transfer in order to do this, because if I'm not mistaken, any cost over $10,000 with federal funds requires a full RFP.
Okay.
That is correct. In this situation, and as I spoke about just a few minutes ago, because of the level of the cost, if to accommodate the nurses' offices and the isolation rooms at the schools and able to utilize any of the COVID funds, which are minimal, it would require an RFP if we did go that route. So if we utilize local funds, then we would have to have a fund balance appropriation to support that spending.
And how much would that fund balance appropriation be? Roughly?
It's going to depend I hate to say it, but it's going to depend upon how many units that we order. I have, based upon discussion, I believe I had a recommendation, or I heard a recommendation of a minimum of 3 for each of our 13 school locations. So we were looking at
About $50,000. So
yes.
Calculated that right at 50,000 if you had 2 replacement filters for each one.
And then if we want more, so I guess there's a question about, do we go ahead with that piece and then the rest use the COVID money for?
Mr. Atherton?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we would be talking about that as the top number, right? If they so chose, you know, they may come back with a much smaller number, obviously,
Right.
once they evaluate. I just don't want to put it out there as, you know, you need to go do this. I prefer the experts to come back and say, we did what you said, you know, they say, no, this is how we did it. So I just wanted clarity around that, you know, it's up to that, depending on their recommendations.
Ms. Smiley?
Ms. Ralph, do you need approval from the board to allocate fund balance to this? Because I know we're not clear on the exact cost right now. Could we do a blanket?
Yes, ma'am, that would be helpful. If I had sense of that we were going to stay up under a certain threshold, I would be comfortable with us going ahead and moving forward and utilizing some of the savings that we have potentially seen in this first quarter. But that would be, you know, I would only feel comfortable doing that probably under $50,000. Anything more than that, I would prefer that we would have a fund balance. And then, of course, I will work to make sure that we utilize dollars from anywhere that we can and save that fund balance if needed. But that if we can't, I need the authority to be able to spend that money, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question?
It did. It did. Thank you.
This is a little off topic, but Rhonda, in terms of the PPE money that we've allocated, there's some evidence, I don't know if you're getting it, that schools are not spending as much on PPE as they expected because families have their own, or kids are bringing their own masks, teachers are, you know, so they're not spending quite as much as they expected to. And I don't know if that's something that you've heard, or the reason I'm asking that is, this is a need, let's spend it on this, and then if we need money for PPE on the fund balance, we go down that path that way. Just a thought.
I have not heard any of those discussions from any of my counterparts, or, but that, you know, I just haven't heard.
Okay.
Could I get a motion to extend the meeting for a few minutes? We are going to move the information items just to report form, and we can bring them back to the next meeting if anyone has additional questions after reading the report. But just to finish up this conversation, I think we're going to need a few extra minutes.
How much time are we trying to just get through this air purifier piece, or are we trying to also talk through tents and bottle fillers?
Dr. Felder, what's your pleasure?
So I believe the air purifiers are the most pressing in terms of acquiring them. So I would need the operations department to weigh in with regards to the other 3 items. I know you're not recommending all of the other 3 items, but in terms of anything that the board may want us to purchase in terms of time frame, because I know time is not on our side, are there any that have to be discussed today? Are there any that could wait until the next meeting and we still be able to get them in time?
Yes,
The board so chooses.
I would suggest that we could take care of the air purifiers tonight, which is more crucially important than the other three. While all three of them are important, but this will be the more crucially important one because of the purchasing and ordering and the time to get it here. That would be my my suggestion on that.
Okay, so I will motion to extend the meeting by 10 minutes.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. Stevens. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
We have 12 more minutes, folks.
I turned off my video. Can I ask make another point?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I remind other panelists to please mute if you're not speaking, just because we're having some connection issues tonight. Thank you. Go right ahead, Ms. Doyle.
I think it's a good idea to give the authority to Ms. Rath to purchase the air filters up to the 50,000, because the other sense of security having a third air purifier purchase for each building is if there were a sick child, in a room, and people might feel better in a purifier to bring down there for the rest of the day to prevent spread. So I just personally would like us to have a minimum of 3 operable air purifiers, excuse me. That's all.
Is that a motion?
If other people don't have discussion, I have a motion.
Mr. Atherton?
I just wanted to confirm, Carrie, that based off of the recommendation of operations.
Yes.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so is that a second, Mr. Atherton?
That would be a second.
Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Doyle and a second from Mr. Atherton. Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle? Motion passes. Thank you, everyone. And so with this, will we pursue getting quotes for more spaces at this point? I mean, this is sort of like a basic coverage, but are we going to look into more?
I'd like to make a motion to do the RFQ, whatever is necessary for the larger purchase of air purifiers.
Second. I have a motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. Stevens. Mr. Atherton?
Discussion?
Sure.
So would that be based off of the operations recommendation?
Yes, it's a good question. I guess if y'all recommended only like 20 of them as opposed to 500 or something, I would hope that we have a chance to hear more about that, because I'm inclined to put them in lots of spaces.
Right. I just didn't want them to blanketly take all of our rooms and just come back with the RFQ for that. I'd prefer them to come back and say, here's our recommendation based on spaces. I agree. If they only came back with 20, I would question that too. I just want to make sure it's not just a blanket every room in every building.
Got it.
Yeah, I think, and I might be seeing it slightly differently in that if we don't, unless we have a way to measure the ventilation in the room, I would err on the side of adding more air purification rather than not. If we had like measurement that said there's plenty of air changes per hour in this room, I'd be fine without it. But in the absence of that information, I'm
I thought that's
more inclined to.
That's what the CO2 work was for.
Sorry, what's that?
Ms. Pitts said that we couldn't get that for quite some time.
That you measure it when all the kids are in the room. That's the thing. So that can't happen until January, really. a little bit.
I mean, if we send out an RFQ, we can still get a range, can't we? I mean, we could say, ask for a range of, 350 to 500 or something and see what the quote would be. Can we do that? I don't know.
Yeah, and, that's it's a good point, because if I'm going to give somebody $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000, I'd like them to come back with a recommendation about where those are needed and what would help, rather than just sell them to us. So I think that would be a way to frame the RFP. I mean, I don't know. I'm way so out of my lane here, but certainly we should be able to get a recommendation.
Oh, sorry.
Ms. Jubison?
You can certainly put out bids that have alternatives in them, like we'd like to see a bid for, 50, 100, 150. I think, and I'll defer to staff, but I think if Ms. Hauser, what you're talking about is more of a service rather than a purchase. You want a consultant or some consultant. And I'm not sure those would come from the same people.
Yeah, I guess I'm I don't know. I'm used to, if I'm going to spend buy that much stuff from somebody, they'll usually help size it. So I don't know, maybe Dr. Williams or Mr. Mincy can make a suggestion. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think I don't know if the board, this is a board thing, I don't know. I don't feel qualified to have this conversation. I'll just stop there.
Mr. Mincy, Ms. Pitts, Dr. Williams, do you have anything to add?
Usually air purifiers are based on the square footage of the room itself. So it's how much air needs to be circulated through it. So we need to make sure that it's sized at the room size or even larger in order to accommodate that space. That's why I would hesitate on ordering varying sizes, because if we were to order one size, we would be able to get a discount on potentially bulk ordering. And I would echo what Eva has said, that most of the places that we would go to for ordering would be those venues that would just produce sell the equipment. They might not necessarily be someone who could also provide a service. So that may require hiring a different company altogether to take a look at air exchanges and maybe particulate studies to be able to ensure it was doing exactly what we needed it to do.
So Ms. Pitts, to your point, so Cameron Park has a brand new HVAC system. So might we have does that assume that we have better circulation in the building than Hillsborough Elementary, for example?
Well, not necessarily than Hillsborough, but it would be safe to say that the 100 wing of Cameron Park would have significantly better circulation, potentially ventilation with the new unit, because we could adjust the fresh air intake, and we know that it's been calibrated recently and it should be operating per manufacturer specifications than the lower hallway of Cameron Park. Yes.
So does that mean we take them off the list, that we might not need to buy units for them? That's really the essence of my question. Does everybody need them?
That would be something that we could do a study with and talk to the engineers, and especially Mr. Sood, to talk about where we should focus our audits in those areas, especially with the buildings that are getting ready to have HVAC replacements. We may need to look at putting them as a top priority. So it would be something that the operations department could definitely sit down and speak with our techs and start to work out a priority list.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Pitts. So board, do we just want, does anyone have any specific motion they would like to make? Do we want to just ask for, say we would like to move forward with this process and hear back from operations around their recommendations for putting out an RFQ? What do we want to do?
Yeah, I had a motion out to move forward with the RFQ. I believe based on recommendations of operations. I did have an assumption that Mr. Atherton called out that it wouldn't be a wildly different number than this. And so I don't know if there's a way to qualify that here. But that's my intent of the motion.
Okay, well, we've got that. And Ms. Stevens, you were the second. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. So, Mr. Atherton?
So just so I have clarity, so Sarah, you're saying you're good with their coming back with a recommendation as part of the RFQ?
I don't think it would be as part of the RFQ. I think they'd determine that ahead of time.
Right. No, the RFQ
process
back with the recommendation. I just want to make sure of the clarity that you were saying.
Yes, I would like the board to have a heads up if it's going to be more than 10% different than what we're looking at.
Okay, yes.
I'm sorry,
Ms. Stevenson.
I want to make sure. So the motion is to proceed with an RFP for filters units for every classroom?
There may be some classrooms that operations doesn't think need them. And we have some spaces where people are working in like a closet space or something that's not a classroom, but where they see small groups of students. And I would hope that we look at the total number here and add in any spaces like that that they think need air purification.
And so just to remind you, you just approved that we get 3 per school. And so that will take away from the total of 503 or so purifiers. There won't be the total of all of that because you've already asked us to get 3 per school already.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Good point. So, Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Ms. Doyle?
Yes, but saying that Mr. Williams made is or Dr. Williams made that it's like already a 10%. Are we attached to the 10% number?
I think it's more just, we'd like to see a quote that's pretty close to what we've got here.
Okay.
I mean, yes, certainly we understand that the 10% is going to be.
If they put it out for bid and it's more than 10% off, you just don't want to hear about it again?
No, it's about the number of air purifiers we're asking about, not the cost. That's the 10% difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
motion to extend by 3 minutes.
Okay.
5 minutes.
Okay. Motion from Ms. Smiley to extend. Second from Mr. Atherton. Ms. Stevens.
Yes, 3 minutes.
Mr. Atherton.
Yes.
Ms. Doyle.
Yes.
Ms. Hauser.
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley.
Yes.
Okay. 4 minutes, people. 4 minutes. So, Ms. Hauser.
Can I help? I guess I think we're saying that operations is going to do their own assessment about what we need and then prepare an RFP to go buy them and then come back to us and tell us how much it's going to cost. That's what we're asking, right?
That's correct. Yes.
To be, right? That's what we're asking for.
That's mostly correct. I think my intent in saying the 10% is with the spirit of probably most classrooms need a unit, and there might be a few that don't.
That would come with assessment, right?
So, Ms. Hauser, is that a yes or a no vote?
I vote, if that's what we're voting for, I'm all in.
Okay. I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Okie doke. We will anxiously await information about air purifiers. So I think that is all we have time for tonight. I appreciate the collaboration from everyone. Dr. Felder, do you want to add anything before we motion to adjourn? Mr.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you to the team for presenting tonight. All the staff, just appreciate it. Thank you to the board.
Thank you. Mr. Atherton?
I know we don't have time, but we discussed the ACH that was presented originally and how we wanted to proceed with that. I know we'll need to push it to another one, but I just wanted to highlight, we were going to talk about it, but we're out of time, of course.
Yeah. Thank you. Good point. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn.
So moved. I have a motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. Stevens. Mr. Atherton?
Yes.
Ms. Doyle?
Yes.
Ms. Hauser?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.